This is absolutely not for public consumption, totally off the record.
Anyway, Brad, great to see you.
You too, George.
It's been a long time.
It has, man. And when last time we were in a meeting like this, it was like podcasts were these like new things. Remember we were going to do with XM radio or something like that. And
right. Yeah. Because I had the studio in DC.
Yeah.
Seemed like a great idea. And I think, wasn't it like one of the MTV VJs? Didn't he invent that? Like Adam something or other? Blank on his name.
Yeah. When he was there. Yeah.
It's weird. Like podcasts started to happen and then I don't know. I think everybody forgot about them. At least I did. Right. And all of a sudden, I think the pandemic, we're all like, I can record a podcast.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
So there you go.
No studio, no nothing, just at home. Yeah.
Where are you today? You in Florida or LA?
I'm in LA. I'm in Fullerton.
It seems to be where everything's at right now. Like, I mean, car wise.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, it's so uncar friendly in so many ways, this area, but everything's here, from business to the cost of everything to regulations. It's really not a car friendly environment at all. But man, the roads are amazing. You know, the weather's good, and people just absolutely are insane for cars here.
And everybody's there. I mean, whether it's like Peterson or whether it's Singer or whether it's all the journalists or whatever.
Yep. And it's for my my demographic, my suppliers, my partners, stuff like that. It's like Scotto's here, Hoonigan, all these guys.
Well, so I see nowadays I'm seeing more RML on Facebook or on Instagram, and I'm guessing that's you.
Yes. It's just me at this point. It's something that, and it's, it stands for Retro Modern Line, and it's the first wheel we made at 1552. And it's basically, it's the cause and the effect of so many things coming together that, you still see right now. That's what 1552 as a company, which, I'm still, I still have an interest in 1552, but I'm not there, every day anymore. Matt and I sold our, majority interest back in 2018, and we're now kind of both doing different things. I've got a new thing. I'm here in Southern California in the planning phase of something really cool and new that I wish I could tell you about, because it's so up your alley. It's not even funny. And there's some, pretty big names in the industry that I'm, talking to and working with, that we're trying to get this going. But that's for probably early 2023. It's something that, for me, I've always enjoyed, building cars. The selling parts and doing that and selling wheels is cool and all, but I've always liked building cars for me, for customers, whatever. So it'll be along those lines. But while I'm doing that, so many people on a regular basis, the RML first wheel we ever made was the Snowflake. It was the GTI, Rabbit GTI we know here in the US as the 14x6 came on the 83 Rabbit GTI. Also came on the Quantum and stuff like that, but it's known for that. And I had always, that's my favorite wheel of all time, my favorite OE wheel. And I wanted to make it in a bigger size to fit, like G60 Corrado brakes, a little bit wider and all that. And so it just was something that's like, I would talk to certain people, vendors and things like that. And back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, saying, why don't you guys do this? This would be cool. It would sell. And, nobody was interested in that niche. And I later learned why. It's not a volume proposition by any stretch. But
so what's really quick? What's volume in? If somebody's has a wheel design idea, wants to do what you did back then, maybe the industry might be different than it was back then, volume wise. But like, when you say making something like that, like what's volume that makes sense to get
manufacturer? If they're gonna what's called open a mold for you, which you pay for, but it's taking place in their production queue, so it's it's significant to them. At least 10,000 wheels, wow. for an individual mold, and every size and width and everything is a different mold. Basically is a different mold, except for flow form, and we can get into that and stuff like that. But you can vary widths when you do flow form with a single mold. But it's Yeah, it's not hard and fast. Typically, the minimum, is a few thousand. But if you only do a few thousand, they're going to retire. They're going to say, we need to retire that, and that's why you see that happen a lot of time. And that's just, that's the natural order of things. You can't, as a wheel company, you're not going to hit a home run on every style, on every mold. Some
Right.
you just keep going. Like for us, it's so it's so temporary, the shelf life. But we came up with some wheels like the Tarmac, which was it was such an old school wheel. It was a our version of an old Speedline OZ chrono kind of thing, but just completely flat. We wanted total flat face. Everybody was doing concave this and that, big lip, and we just wanted to do the simplest, almost two-dimensional design. And those still sell really well. Still keep reordering them, and you don't really see that longevity outside of BBS and some of those wheels. So we were really fortunate for that. But not every design is going to do that. So what I'm working in is like super niche, because it's it's a retro modern design based on an OE wheel for a very focused group of enthusiasts. I mean, fortunately, the Snowflake is a 4x100 bolt pattern, and Toyota Scions have that, and Mini Coopers and stuff. So we did get some crossover like that, just because it's a cool looking wheel. But mostly it's a it's a VW.
Yeah.
So when I was talking to Jason Sellers, who's our engineer, and who's now the president of 1552, they get annoyed that, because we haven't made that wheel for, gosh, I don't know, it's probably been, I don't know, maybe almost 10, no, not 10 years, but probably about 8 years. And we only made so many of them. And used ones are selling for like $3,000 a set. It's ridiculous.
Those things have a total value in the used market. It's crazy to watch.
Yeah, and I'm about to destroy that. I know I'm going to do that for that, but whatever. I made the original. I mean, that was my thing. No. That's right. Matt Crook, who's my partner in 1552, former partner. He was working at a wheel company in California. I was back in Florida doing 1552, and I'm like, dude, I want to make these wheels. Can you help? He's like, nobody's going to want to do that for you, but let me talk to my boss. And the guy, he said, yeah, he'll do it. He's going to make some money off me, but I didn't care. I just want to get them made. And they did really well. And I want to make them again. I want that's the kind of thing where it's like, I feel like it's kind of like my legacy. That's what started us doing the wheels and stuff. So it's like, and there's still some demand. I don't know how much. We'll find out. I'm going to do a container and see where it goes. But RML was always supposed to be something more than just a Snowflake. We had a 16-inch teardrop that we actually had done, a mold made and a sample that was right before we sold the company. And after we sold the company, it got squashed. And there's BMW E30 bottle cap. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with the RML concept. So we'll see where it goes. Maybe I'll be doing wheels again for a lot longer than I ever thought.
Well, I saw you. I can't imagine given the quantities you just gave me, I can't imagine it makes sense. I would love to see you do it if you did, but I think I saw you teasing. Remember the what would they be called? Snowflakes too? The Audi wheel?
I've seen
kind of 4,000
waffle irons, but I've always called them the Snowflake. I thought, but I don't know what the scene guys call it, but
yeah, I'll be honest, I don't.
It is to me. It's the Audi, the Audi 4000. It was on the the coupe and the 5+5 and all that, and I freaking love that. Yeah, I did tease that because I want to see what guys think, and I had a bunch of people say that will never sell, but according to the comments, like, I know it's one thing to make a comment in Instagram, take my money, and then another to actually give me $1,000 or whatever it costs. There's a big gap there, but I want to get to a point and where I can do that if I have to pay more for molds or something like that, so I can do lower volume. I think there's a market for it. My niche within a niche, I think, is relevant, and I'd like to do that. Because otherwise you got to go to forged, you got to go to 3-piece, you got to do the guys that are doing they're cutting out the centers of the OE wheels and putting them in BBS barrels. I that's cool as hell for a show car. But when you take a 30-year-old gravity cast wheel that was engineered as a whole with a rim on it, and you cut it out and then you make it act as a center in a forged aluminum, that's used and hasn't been x-rayed or either. That it's a little sketchy, but
that's what I was going to ask. I've seen them at shows, and on shows sitting there, I've seen like whatever what's the wheel that somebody's doing it now as a replica, the G60 wheel. But like,
oh yeah, the Sebring,
yeah, I remember seeing people with the Sebring on like rally golfs with like the plus size riveted, and I was like, it looks cool, but like, take that out on a track, I'm not really sure how it's going to hold up.
No, but you and I both know those cars aren't going on any tracks, so it's probably okay.
Fair point.
It's just I don't know. I had one guy, basically who's making throw me under the bus about my, old crappy snowflakes made in Asia and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, they're engineered, they're TÜV, not TÜV approved, but we do the certification. We engineer all our wheels to TÜV specs. So it's like, these aren't, crappy. They're better than 30-year-old OE wheels, that's for sure. So I don't know. It's just, whatever.
All right, I've got something to show you. A Photoshop that I did is we're talking about snowflakes.
Oh, one of George's stuff. I miss George's Photoshop. People need to understand. Back in our Vortex Media days, and you were funny. You were funny with those.
It's a bad habit. It's certainly a bad habit. But so this one might be of interest to you commercially. So that's where I'm going with this. So like a year or two ago, it's a Volkswagen Photoshop. So apologies to the people who are on this as an Audi podcast, but so I forget why we were talking about snowflakes, but I was talking to Sean Maynard at Volkswagen about it, and largely a concept based on a model that maybe pre-Jamie Orr we wouldn't really think of as like an enthusiast car. But with that said, quantum synchro wagon look on an Atlas.
That's badass, man. I have people with Touaregs and Tiguan and ask me, am I going to make 20s? Because I did 18s, and that I was shocked at how well the 18s sold. We only made them one run. That's really cool. I love it.
It's funny how much that car, the Volkswagen Atlas, takes to like the quantum synchro wagon kind of like just throwing like the black optics on it and the snowflakes. It's like I totally get it. I see the line between that and the quantum.
Dude, email me that.
I will definitely do it.
There's somebody that I wish I could tell you what was going on, that this is actually very coincidental, that needs to see this. They're going to love it. So
yeah. Anyway, well, all right. So we jumped kind of right into this. Let me backtrack. So you and I go way back. I think the first time I met you,
very old,
was like your old Springfield store.
Yes.
VW Sport.
65
across the street,
Back Lake Road. Yes.
You're right. A little bit of history. The second story, I remember I had a Jetta VR6, and the first time, terrible suspension, terrible tires on those cars, but it was one of the German ones.
Yes.
And so I 94, and I rolled down there because I forget where I found you guys online, and you were on like a second floor, and you did all your installations across the street at the dealer, I think. And
VW Springfield. Yeah, we had a tech there who was, and it was all so not legit. I mean, because
it all starts that way, right?
I know the second. First of all, second floor was zoned only for. I mean, it was all insurance offices up there. You can't do any retail up there. Not that we sold much more than VW Sports stickers and stuff at the time, but it was it was so not okay. But then we did that for like a year. And then we moved into our place in Alexandria and Eisenhower Avenue, and that was cool. The landlord, the group didn't like us at all because we were doing engine swaps and stuff in the back, and it was not that kind of facility. But we had a really cool showroom, and it was very, it's like, because we'd been to Kempton to see Opt and all the big tuner, Hoonigan and Projectzwo and all that, and we basically said, all right, we're going to build a German style showroom here. And it didn't make any sense financially, but it was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly cheated. It was cool. And the amount of gatherings you would have there, like just fill up the lot with stuff.
Yeah.
The following year building.
That turned into a problem. We had, first of all, we were right in front of the what is the Eisenhower Bridge there that go, the only thing that connects Virginia and Maryland right there.
Right.
Post road empties right out. So during, from 3 o'clock till like whenever, people decide instead of sitting in traffic, they wanted to just hang out at us, because we had PTCC and STW and, touring car videos playing, and big library with every magazine from around the world in there. It was pretty dope. And, but people were hanging out. So all my sales guys were hanging out too. And the phone was ringing off the hook. And then you realize even back then, it's like, we make way more money on a sales call, on an online call, or, order over the phone. And it takes way less time than somebody in the store. And I'm like, this is not working.
I do remember one of your open houses, though, was one of the things that kind of opened my eyes. And like, I always dug Audi, when I remember I rolled down there, there's the time I still had this 94 VR6 Jetta. At that time, you guys had already done brakes and suspension and wheels and tires for me. I think I had OE wheels, but otherwise. But then I got a ride at one of your open houses. Adrian Jones, who was your partner at the time, had one of the first B5A4 180s, and it was, did it have an op tune on it? Maybe, but
no, it was who was the one in Virginia? That's
Jack.
Nope. It'll come to me. This is just brain fart, but yeah, they're
we're also
know them really well, and they had a 1.8T. It was simple. It was OBD1 throttle cable and all that, but yeah, it woke that up.
Yeah, I was amazed. There were four. We went out quickly onto the Beltway, and there were four of us in the car. I think I was in one of the back seats, and he got on it, and I was like, this thing is ridiculous, and it's a 1.8. Like all of my experiences previously in a 4-cylinder Volkswagen have been like,
oh yeah,
cool cars, but not fast.
Yeah. Even a 5-cylinder normally aspirated Audi was not quick like that. This thing, and it had instant torque. Yeah.
But I just drove 1.8.
Auto Authority.
That's right.
Yeah, they were really good. We did a lot of cool stuff with them. They helped us with we were working with Nick Saran with his first Z engineering kits and stuff that he brought over to the UK, and he had his software, but we were doing cams and stuff, and they worked with us on that. It was really cool. I miss that kind of hands-on stuff that we did.
Right.
Ran into soldered in EPROMs, or all that stuff. That was super high tech back then.
Well, it's funny too. You look at that, the way that market went, and it was I think the people who really owned it there for a while in the beginning were not the traditionals. Like you had APR and GIAC really, who got big really fast because they understood the value of the web platforms that were out there. They're everywhere on Audi World and Vortex and whatever.
Yeah.
And the ones like Newspeed who didn't jump into that were like, it's amazing how a lot of the market was shifting then. We saw it at Vortex too, where like there was so much attention at European Car and the print publications, and like if you didn't make the shift, you were kind of left out in the cold.
Yeah, no, that's actually true. That's a good point.
Yeah. But anyway, so you were VW Sport, and then at some point in Alexandria you changed to 1552.
Yeah, and that goes back to the origin of VW Sport, which started with Joseph Hoppen. Joe is, I'm sure your audience is well aware, is the ex, director of motorsports for VW, Porsche, and Audi, North America. He was the guy who got Porsche into Can-Am. He handled the Super Vs and everything. He was legendary. Well, just as luck would have it, I was living in Sarasota, Florida, and he had retired there. And I was a tennis pro, I was a teaching pro, and I was using the beach courts at Siesta Key for lessons. And I remember coming off, and I had I forget which car. It may have been the Cabrio that I had, or I think it was a Mulberry VR6 GTI. It's like one of the first ones in the US, 95. Anyway, I'm walking to my car in the beach parking lot with my tennis bag and ball hopper and stuff, and just slowly cruising by is this old dude in a dusty mauve 4-door Mark III Golf VR6. Now, those don't exist here. We never got that color. We never got a 4-door Golf VR6. It was never called a Golf VR6 here. It was always a GTI VR6. So on my radar, and I'd gone to Frankfurt in 92 for the release of the Mark III Golf there.
Did
And
you really?
yeah, and the VR6 was center stage, and that was so revolutionary, putting a narrow angle, high horsepower in a little car like that. But that color was it for me, dusty mauve, man, that was it. And that's why I bought Mulberry, because it was the closest we could get to that in North America. So he drives by, and then he like does a double take, and he sees my car, and I think I have an opt muffler on it already, and a couple other opt parts. I think I had the round headlights and stuff. So he pulls across, and he gets out of his car to come over, and he's just shaking my hand. Hello, I'm Joseph Hutton. And it's like, I knew who he was, but I was still geeking out over the car. And he's like, "This is wonderful what you're doing. You know the opt? Do you know about the opt?" And then I'm like, "Yeah, And at the time, we had one importer here that did. I'm not going to mention him. It's anyway. He brought it in, and it was I bought from him begrudgingly because he was the only option in town. But anyway, so Joe was talking about it. He's like, "Yes, Johan Opt. He's a very good friend of mine. I know I'm from Kempton, all this stuff." He's like,
"Oh, was he?"
"Yeah, I sell Opt products here, but for Audi, what do you do? Do you sell them?" And I'm like, no. I mean, I had a small customer group, Adrian and I, because we bought so much stuff, we would get discounts and things. And New Speed, Aaron Newman was, a friend of mine, and would help me out and stuff like that. He'd help me build every Volkswagen I've ever had, New Speed. So, right. I just said, "Yeah, I have some customers and stuff." He's like, "Oh, well, I would love to talk to you." And he invited me to his shop in Sarasota. So I did one day, and I went down there, and he's like, "I would like you." He goes, "People know that I sell Opt products, and I'm Audi Sport, and but I'm retired. I don't want to do any Volkswagen stuff." He's like, "If you want to come along and help me and do, you can use my Opt account and all the companies I deal with, and you can sell to Volkswagen. And you will be VW Sport USA." And we had the blessing of Volkswagen of America at the time, because he had it throughout. It was unofficial, it wasn't a formal licensing deal, but he's "You can do it." So anyway, we did that for a while, and it was great. Being in Sarasota, Florida, as a VW, store wasn't really, the best way to do it. Adrian was living in Virginia, so we moved it up there. And then a year later, Joe, fully retired. He stopped doing any, car stuff. He just did MTM, but his son mostly ran that. But he stopped doing Opt and all that. So he's like, "I've got something to tell you, Brad. You can continue with VW Sport, but Volkswagen wants to work out a licensing deal with you." So I entertained it, just like a single phone call. They told me what they wanted, and I kind of laughed and got all my guys together. I said, "Well, we're gonna have to change our name." So we're all sitting in my office coming up, and everything was so Euro this, Autobahn that, and it was just like I just didn't want to do it. It's like, we're established. Let's come up with something a little different. That's like something that people, in the know understand. But it kind of, they're going to ask. Most people are going to ask, "What does that mean?" And that's where we came up with 1552, 1552, because we were Franz Diebold, who was a tech for me at the time, was sitting in a chair, and he had the 1552 VAG tool on his lap. And that was actually really cool, because before that you had the 1551, which was this giant thing on a cart, that you had.
Right.
These are, people don't know, these are diagnostic tools. They're scan tools that the dealerships use. And the big one was that it was on a cart, and you wheeled it from car to car. The 1552 was a portable, and you could, it had minimal like data logging potential, things like that, but you could plug it in and drive, and monitor the car, certain things that you couldn't do. So it was pretty epic. And we were one of the few, aftermarket tuners that had our own. We actually had a couple. And so Franz like, "Yeah, let's just call it 1552. And everybody's like, "Yep,
that works."
That works. Yeah. So it was 1552 design. Then it just became 1552.
All right, I'm going to divert here. This can be some serious nerd knowledge that probably nobody cares about but me and you. But this is a conversation I've always wanted to have with you anyway. So if you remember, like the 11th hour before we were about to launch Fourtitude at Vortex, you were working with us at the time, right?
Yes, I was your editorial director for across all the sites at the time. Yes.
So you shared your disagreement with me that Fortitude was the right name, and it's all coming together now because like part of it was, and I think we had this conversation later, we're like, yeah, it was a cool name, but you were going to have to establish it literally everywhere because it doesn't have an association with the brand in any way, right? Like all the competitors, for whatever reason, Quattro World, Audi World, Audi Zine, all used the name. And that was one of the reasons was, we with Vortex, we always kind of danced on that line too of like, do we need a licensing deal? Don't we? And with Fortitude, it was like, we're clear, right?
Right.
But you're right. It was always an uphill slog to get name recognition because nobody really got it unless they understood the kind of weird inside thinking that it was actually a license plate. There's a guy in DC named Phil Ackley. I don't know if he was a customer of yours back then, but like he's a member of the club, and he had I saw his car parked at the 1999 Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, and it said 4TTUDE or UD or something like that on it. It's like, that's really clever. And I grabbed the URL. He got the plate because he turned 40. He didn't get the plate because it was an Audi thing. It's like completely rando.
Well, you didn't share that with me back then. That would have helped me talk you out of it a little more. But
well, that name was the backup plan for Audi World because Audi was. We were kind of, remember, were you with us when we were kind of quasi associated with? Remember, like what was it?
No, this was just after that. I was with
VWvortex. Remember VWvortex?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so Audi World was part of that, and we were from a moment in time in that orbit, and then we left because we weren't really happy with the way it was going. But like Audi World remained, but we knew from that brief period that like Audi wasn't really cool with that use of that name, and so yeah, I mean Audi Club has a licensing deal, right? Like that's how we get recognized. But anyway, I never realized I never did the math on 1552 and was like, man, he had that uphill slog too. Like now that I get why your comment was particularly important to you because he's lived it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it worked well for us, obviously. And we always wanted to leave our options open. I mean, selling parts and everything is awesome. But we had always wanted to make our own stuff. We always wanted to potentially sell like completed cars or something. There was always something bigger that we aspired to as on the creative side of things, almost like from a design perspective. So we didn't want it, and I mean, Volkswagen was where we were at, but when we were VW Sport, it was hard. We had to send Audi customers to Joe. Joe didn't deal in the things that a lot of them wanted. So it was hard, and Adrian didn't care. He's like, I'm buying an Audi, I'm buying an A4 when the B5 when they come out. I know we're VW Sport, and he didn't put an Audi sports sticker, he put a VW sports sticker. So it's like, yeah, we do Audi. And Joe, at that point he didn't really care. But once we became 1552, it was vague enough for all that we could have been anything. I mean, we could sell women's shoes.
Right.
So that's like Plan
It's an open brand.
Yeah.
I remember the decals you guys had on the corner of the
hood flag. Yeah, that
was such a thing. Like you go to Waterfest and like everybody had those on.
Yep.
And honestly,
we sold more of those than anything else as far as parts. A SKU number that was like our best selling thing, and the windshield banners.
That's funny. I remember the cars when you're talking about building whole cars. Like I'm thinking about particularly the VR6 cabs that you guys had. It was the same car, right? The Mulberry, was it a Mulberry one, and then the silver one? Was that the same car?
It started out. It was Tornado Red. It's just a 4-cylinder back in '94, and then then I painted it Mulberry to go along with my GTI, and did the VR swap, normally aspirated, and then did it silver and turbocharged it for its final incarnation.
You did some really subtle flaring on that car too, didn't you? Like I remember.
Because I had to have 18s. That was it. It was all about big wheels and the lowest profile tires, and to me it needed to be low by today's standard. People laugh at that.
Yeah, right.
But we had coilovers. We had the first commercially available set of coilovers. It was an Opt Bilstein kit, and they were like $2,400 a set. That's back in the 90s. That's ridiculous money, but had to be able to get it down. People were cutting springs and stuff back then, so this worked. But yeah, I spent a lot of time on those fenders.
That car was cool.
Yeah.
All right, before we go too far into that, I'm curious if I can go back to Joe for a minute, because Joe Hoppin is something that, like, as somebody who prides himself on spending some time and being a student of history in this space of the brand, like Audi of America and its history kind of pre B5A4 gets really just kind of thin because very few people are around from that period anymore. And of course, Joe's no longer with us.
Right.
But like, I'd love to know, I don't know if Joe ever talked about that period of time or whatever, but like, it seems so sort of, I don't want to say like stuff falling off the back of a truck, but it was so much more like relaxed and like shoot from the hip in that era. Can-Am rally.
That's why he got so far. He could charm anybody. Joe is a schemer, man. He did what he wanted and he did it his way, and you stay out of his way kind of thing. Because people like him. He's got, he has everybody on his side like that. So I could totally see that. He didn't put it in that terms. Joe would always, he had a corporate, he couldn't help it. He
knew how to navigate it.
Yeah.
Clearly.
But he talked about it being a lot of fun, and, even, sort of lamenting over how, political things and corporate things ultimately got towards the end. So he would say, like he retired at the right time and stuff like that.
Sure.
I don't know if I could, do it. It's, accountants are looking over your shoulder for everything, and, sponsors and stuff like that. No, it was like it was a skunk works kind of thing.
I mean, you look at I don't know when he starts exactly, but you said he's Can-Am, right? So like early 70s.
Yeah.
So that's 91730 Porsches. Those are ridiculous cars. And then on through the Audi rally period. I don't know at what point he dropped out of Volkswagen Group. But I mean, it was phenomenal history there.
Yeah, I think it was mid 80s that he did.
Okay, so thereabouts. Rally era is coming to a close.
Right. Yeah, but he's North America, so he also said he was aware of all the Group B stuff, and definitely enjoyed it, and I'm sure worked with some of those guys, but he didn't get the fun that they had over in North America.
I think so. Buffum did get a Sport Quattro towards the end. I assume that was probably through Joe, and the way the American like SCCA Pro Rally allowed it to continue to compete. So the Sport Quattro continued to clean up in the United States for like a couple more seasons after
it was a privateer, right?
Right. Well, good question.
Technically.
I don't want to. I'm at the edge of my knowledge here, so I just don't want to speak to. But I know he ran for Audi of America with like factory livery during that period. But like, I don't know what point. I'd have to go back and look at photos and try and see, right? But I think he, through at least the Sport Quattro's arrival, he was with them. And at a certain point, maybe he's running as a privateer. I know he has still in his shop up in Vermont. He's got an S2 that he ran towards the end with like, I think it's got a Group B motor in it.
Oh, wow.
And so that car he competed in SCCA Pro Rally just seemed to be like Wild Wild West too, right? Like it was it wasn't locked down like WRC was. And so, they might do. I know Joe is behind like Pikes Peak, right? Like Pikes Peak with Michelle and her, like, and doing the research we did on that, right? Like just trying to make the rivalry between like managing Bobby Unser and Michelle and maybe trying to have them run in the same year, which never actually happened, but I know was an idea he had. Like, it seems like a fascinating.
He loved Michelle Mouton. He loved her. Yeah.
Anyway, such a fascinating era. I'm always interested to hear like what people know of it, because there's so few people who know anything of it.
I know. It's a shame because it was like some of the funnest times in motorsport that, that I'm aware of. I'm sure the older guys had even more fun in their days.
Sure.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem the same right now.
It's funny, like next year for Le Mans, and we'll see if Audi's in it. I suspect they probably aren't at this point because they're trying to shift things to F1, but I don't know. I was encouraged for Le Mans next year. Yeah, some of the stuff, the US like formula is a bit formulaic. Don't want to be redundant there in saying that, right? But like it's 3 different chassis, maybe 4 different chassis, and I think everything, all the hybrid, and it's not the science fair that LMP1 was. And while LMP1 was like so much more buttoned down from a rule perspective, it's still kind of that open. I love the science fair nature of motorsport, right? If you allow people to try things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's why, and I respect the hell out of NASCAR and their drivers and stuff like that, but that's why that's never
Spec,
interested
yeah.
me, the template thing there. And yeah, and spec racers too, those guys, my uncle's been involved in, Formula Renault and all those, so many of the spec race, but again, I love the, the open fields of all the different things. And, I grew up near Lime Rock Park, and my dad used to race Formula Vs, actually Super Vs, and with Bob Sharp. Bob Sharp was a good friend of his. He had a dealership up in Connecticut, so my dad always had like tricked out 510s and Zs and stuff. So he would race and take me up there, and that's back SCCA heyday.
Right.
All the Trans Am cars, and then IMSA started with the GTU and GTO cars, and it's like then Audi comes, and it was like it was amazing, because Audi was nothing before then,
right.
in American
sports car. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, for sure. And then they come in, and it's like, and I remember one day, and we were there over Memorial Day weekend, and that was like a big IMSA race, and they had two of the, the 90 Quattro, GTO cars, and it was raining. And Lime Rock is a 1.5 mile track. There's only one left-hand turn. It's actually almost, they added a chicane, so it's like 1.6 now, but whatever. It's tiny, and it's narrow, and I mean, but it's beautiful, and it's hard for these big cars to pass, and they were lapping the, in a 45-minute, heat, they were lapping the field twice in the rain. And that's, that whole unfair advantage thing, but that's what,
right.
Absolutely. The sound they made, everything about them, they're so aggressive, and they're so futuristic. You couldn't, all these other cars have big, bulging fender flares and stuff. These things were just wide. They just, and the turbo fans and everything. And to me, as a young guy, it's like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. Yeah.
Is that kind of what got you? I guess I never knew the part about your dad and Lime Rock. I guess so is that what got you into it, that period of time?
Absolutely. Being at Lime Rock is one of the best spectating part. It's in a little valley. There's no stands, right. There's no stadiums. It's all, you sit on grassy hills and you can see 75% of the track. It's absolutely amazing. And the pits are, open to the spectators and stuff. It's really a cool park. And so I looked forward to those weekends like crazy to go up there, and I would just cruise the parking lot because of stuff you would see, 930 turbos everywhere.
I'll go back to the Vortex thing one more time. I'm sure it'll happen again in this conversation. I used to drive Von Druska nuts because when we would go to Wolfsburg, I would want to walk the parking lot, like the employee parking lot, because like that's where all the cool stuff was parked.
I did that every time we went to Germany too. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. He's like, dude, let's get in the museum or whatever. Like, no, the cool stuff's here.
The cool stuff's out here. Yes.
Yeah.
You go to our old shop in the library, which is full of, film, photos and in photo albums. And it's just, some of them are just full of us just going up and down the parking lot. Cause Adrian was exactly the same. Some of the stuff would blow our minds,
Yeah.
I mean, even back then, seeing rally golfs as daily drivers and, sport quattros and stuff, it was just, the Germans are awesome.
Nuts.
Yeah.
It's such a great part of their culture.
Yes.
I've always appreciated that.
Yep. Same here. So, but the hopping part in VW Sport and the way that, that company had morphed over time. And then, the wheel thing did well. Well, actually the Snowflake did well. But we were thinking, okay, what's the next wheel we're going to do? And that's where Matt and I were sitting around saying, we don't want to be trendy, so let's not do anything concave. What about a totally flat wheel? And our, 5-spoke is, everybody's starter wheel. And we would go through, we had like our lookbooks of all the cars that we loved, and, from OZ to, the Compomotives versions of those, and, all that. And we came up with it, and we had Jason draw it up, and we put it on Facebook. Facebook was it back then, and this is 2010, I think, maybe 11, something like that. They weren't screwing with your algorithms. You couldn't even pay them to promote anything, that they weren't monetized at all yet, and we had a massive following, and our followers actually got to see our posts. was amazing. I don't know if people can even
It
understand.
was pretty powerful back then. Yeah. I think at that point, pages had just kind of happened, right? Like
Yes.
pages are kind of nothing. Everything's groups. But like back then, I remember having like an individual identity for Fortitude, right? Like it was
Right.
before they had pages and was like, this is dopey. And then they opened up pages like, okay, now you can really build a following.
Right. So we posted just a rendering of the tarmac, and a day later, Brian Scotto hits me up, and Scotto, he's like an old customer. Scotto's from the the East Coast. He's from Brooklyn and stuff, and he's in a club called Auto Krieg, which they were, let's say, infamous in the VW
Pain in the
scene.
ass on our forums, but I still love Brian anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. They all got banned. Each one of them. They took pride in how many. But so he called me up, and he was working with Ken Block. He was basically Ken's like business manager and stuff like that. They did I don't know, it's not Cannonball, but they did something cross country, and Subaru. Ken was working with Subaru anyway. He's like,
right.
It's like, dude, what's up with that wheel? We're, Ken's looking for a new wheel for the gym. He had already made Gymkhana 3, so he had 3 of them. And it was that epic one that in just in France on that bank thing. I mean, that was like one of the best one. And I think it was his first one in a Ford, in a Fiesta. Anyway, he's like, Ken's looking for a new wheel for the Gymkhana. I'm like, get the hell out of here. Sure he is. And we're gonna make it, right? This is our second wheel. This wheel doesn't even exist yet. It's a rendering. It's like, wouldn't this be cool? We're the guys who make snowflakes, remember? He's like, no. He goes, Ken is, the wheels that he'd been using in the past weren't strong enough. I won't call them out or whatever. A lot of people know. He goes, even though they're forged, they kept breaking. He wants something strong, and he wants something cool. And Ken likes supporting new companies. And I told him that you and Matt are my friends, personal friends, and you're starting out. He wants to do that. And that's
How
what
cool is that?
A lot of people don't know about. Ken is like super loyal. Ken, he started DC. He's an entrepreneur. He gets it. He was a little guy, at 1.2, just, an athlete doing his thing. And so he really thought that was a cool opportunity. And, we definitely caused him some headaches along the way. And you can ask, Derek, his team manager, about that, how we we caused some delays and some things there because we were noobs. But I mean, the relationship was always amazing. Ken, there are these big ass companies that would contact him after every Gymkhana video and say, hey, we'd like to give you wheels and be that and pay you a lot of money, and Ken said no.
That's cool
too. So got to give him tons of credit for that. But so we had to rush this design through because they were ready to get started. So we did a forge set, and it was our first motorsport wheel, obviously. So trying to work with that, make it strong enough, not too heavy. There's a steep learning curve because there's certain things that you expect on a race car to break upon contact, and other things that you really don't want to break, based on the spare parts that you bring to an event and your ability to remove and replace them. So we had a couple for Gymkhana 4. It was definitely a learning experience. That was the one at Universal Studio, and we'll just say that we actually made those wheels a little too strong. And after that, he ended up using just our off-the-shelf cast wheels. And those, and because that's very similar to what a race car wants. The way that the load ratings and the all the safety concepts that we work with in our engineering are compatible like that, especially his Gymkhana thing. But we never got our wheels FIA approved, so we weren't on all of his competition when he was doing WRC. But all the Gymkhana videos, some of the local events, pro rally, things like that. So it was really cool. I mean, that was a really fun time for us, and God helped our recognition, like,
I bet,
and especially in the wheel game. Yeah,
it's funny the phenomenon that Gymkhana became, right? Like it's it's not a simple formula, but it is. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure it's Brian would probably be like shooting it. I'm sure it's not easy, and there's a real art to it. But like at the end of the day, like hooning a car around, it's in retrospect, the perfect formula for
That's
YouTube.
what, I mean, it speaks to us on a base level, and we don't care that it is, the viewer doesn't care that it's a truly logistical nightmare. I mean, we did,
Yeah.
Gymkhana 7 was out here in Southern California. I mean, we shut down the 101 freeway for like an hour to do some filming there. We were in the LA River doing, doing takes in there. It was not easy at all.
Did you get to attend some of the filmings?
Yeah, we went to pretty much all of them. The only one we didn't go to was I guess the one in Dubai. I forget what number that was, 8 or something like that. But yeah, we went to all of them.
Fun.
Yeah.
Sounds rad.
Yep.
I'm so glad to see them in the Audi fold. I'm happy for Brian too, because man. I know it. I think the first time I met him, we were at Sebring we were both in Audi hospitality, and like he came up to me and he was like, you know how Brian is just genuine all the time, right? Like just always. And I think that's why he's one of my favorite people in the industry, but he's not fake in any way. And he came up and he's like, he's editor, even at that time, I think he was he at 0 to 60, I guess at that point. I don't know, maybe. And he's like, I'm a big fan of Fourtitude. I'm like, I had a pretty narrow window of people who were big fans, right? So I was like, all right, cool, whatever.
He's like 6'7", so that
I know, right? And so I was like, at first I'm like, I don't really. Generally, when people would tell me they were a big fan of like the very, very narrow niche of what I did, I'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? Like, I would like the more I talk to him, and the more watching him like go down with all that,
you must be in heaven seeing him and Ken doing.
Oh, totally.
I'm so, not jealous, but it's like the timing. It's like shit. I got done with 1552 and we sold a company, and like that should have been us. And it's like, now he's got Rotiform on all this stuff, and they're hanging out with Audi and going over that. It's like, man, Rotiform guys they're living large right now.
It's a great time to be in that space. And I'll tell you what's even more remarkable about it is it's not a time. Probably the switch to electromobility is helping. I know that's a big part of Ken's tie-in. They did the cars for SEMA, but that wasn't an Audi thing. That was more just Brian wanting to finally finish his car, right? And Ken wanting to get an icon for himself. But there's not a lot of money in the space right now, right? Like all the manufacturers are spending money on even if they have parts, which is the war in Ukraine's not helping what's already been a backlog. Yeah. But like beyond that, the switch to electromobility has taken like so much budget out of everybody, because you're literally developing 2 different platform sets, 2 different.
And one's dead. One has a dead end. One is nobody wants to invest in. It's on its last breath. So to be doing that. But Audi's very smart, and Brian is always, his sense of PR has always been top notch. Brian knows the scene. He listens. He actually listens. He reads comments on the Hoonigan and stuff like that. He's not just some guy sitting in an office. He really cares about all that stuff. So he knows, and I'm sure he helped Audi understand as well the link. It's cool. Electric cars, fine. You're going to get that, but you got to keep that link within the brand, and the heritage, the motorsport heritage is so iconic that you can't just leave it on the table just because those things have internal combustion engines and the new cars don't.
Totally right. And I think that's what I wrestle with, is that like you have this switch coming with electromobility. You have kids whose like main view of independence nowadays isn't their car, but their phone, right? Yeah. And so it's a real challenge of a time. And so seeing car manufacturers question, like, we before the call started, we're chatting about wheels and kind of where wheel trends are, and volume is for everything is SUVs, right? So or crossovers. And so it's almost like this applianceification of the industry, where that's just a transportation appliance. And I for me, that's been the biggest puzzle. And, working at Audi Club, it's what we do is engagement and being invested in a brand. And why are you invested in a brand? If it, I have a Bosch dishwasher at home. I know it's a Bosch because I think we bought it because I thought it was cool because it was German and I like the design.
I have one too. I do.
But at the end of the day, I don't care about it, right? Like I put my dishes in it and close it, and I'm never going to think about it twice, except for maybe to bring it up in a podcast when I'm complaining about appliances. And so like that's where like I don't want the cars to become that. The cars have to remain something that like people are engaged in. And so for that, I like turn more to like Disney, right? Like here you have a company that's like that gets IP, right? That their IP is timeless. They can continue to play those things, and more than like JMA is designing the new Beetle or whatever. Like it's a long progression, and it's something that you can continue to enrich your product. Volkswagen Group, above all, I think maybe BMW is in the same league as far as being a good brand steward. But I'm going on a tangent here. I'm sorry.
No, I totally agree with you, and I have my thoughts align with that too, because as enthusiasts, we're kind of, dinosaurs. We're somewhat threatened, our old way of life too, and
Right.
we're old like dinosaurs. So you have the fact that our way of life is changing, whether we want it to or not. And, how do we look at that? How do we see the glass being half full? And you're absolutely right. And I think, some of these companies get it too. And it's, my view is, I mean, like Tesla has been, a paradigm shift. It's changed everything. And the way, and then the Plaid, the Model S Plaid, just like it's rewritten the rules for what fast is. And to some degree, even the Challenger, Hellcats and all that stuff. I mean, we're talking, I remember when an 11-second, super bike was a fast, appliance. I mean, it was something that was, scary fast. Now we have like 8-second, 9-second, OEM car. It's just mind boggling. So, what we think of fast and fun has to change, because, faster and fast, we've reached it. That's it.
Yeah.
You really aren't going to get, now we're in, literally tenths of a second to argue with online. I know it's fun for a lot of people, but for me as an enthusiast, it's like, where do we look now? And it's like, the more analog stuff that we have, that, and it's cool because it makes, like, to be able to enjoy, let's say, a Mark II Volkswagen GTI, like a 16 valve. Back in the day, and not too long ago, I would get one of those, and all I could think of was yanking that engine out, put a VR6 in or turbo or something, because it's just not fast.
Right.
It's 123 horsepower in US spec, the 1.8, and it's just not fast, and that's not good enough. And now it's like, there's a nostalgia. It's like, yeah, I'd like to rebuild one. I want to do I want to make it, I don't care about power. I want to do what I can just to let it rev to 8,000, and then I'm happy as hell. I make the car lighter and stuff. It's different, and that's, electrification has done that. On that level, and in my opinion, made you appreciate the older cars. And I don't think they're going to just all of a sudden disappear either.
Yeah, no. I mean, the market seems to suggest that everybody thinks they're well, not that they're going to disappear, but it almost seems like musical chairs, right? Everybody's like, oh my gosh, a nice GTI. Oh my gosh, a nicer Quattro.
Oh yeah. Now the bring a trailer phenomenon. We just reached that. That's like isn't that like the modern context of mentioning Hitler in a discussion or something?
Is it?
Once you bring a trailer, and as far as pricing in the market, it's like, yeah, you just shut down.
There's tough, right? It's gentrification of the automobile, but it's weird because, like, I'll look at the Quattro market, for instance, right? Like, a couple years ago, right after Vortex, I bought a car. I bought an it's solid. It's just patinaed.
I know that car.
Right. That car. So I bought it because I was going to go I had a partner lined up, and we were looking, before I got started working with Audi Club, we were talking about building. Yeah, I'm going to shoot lofty on the reference I say, but like Singer has set such a model, right? And they're kind of retro modern, continuation cars, whatever you want to call them. And like, so like, I still think the market for Quattros, there's not much volume there, so maybe not, but it seemed like it at the time. And I guess I was living wishfully that maybe there were still some Coupe Quattros that hadn't been converted to rally cars in Europe that would be easy pickings, and we could just build them. So we bought this one, and I bought it cheap, and it's just been sitting in a warehouse until more recently I'm starting to play with it. But I'm mixed in this space. Like, everybody's like, I'm glad because I'm in, because I don't want to buy one anymore, right? Like, they're so expensive. But like, at the same time, like, so the guys who could afford them in the past are like, yeah, it sucks that they're so expensive, but at the same time, being worth money now has now moved them to the point where, like, the 911 market went years ago, which is, now that they're worth money, people can afford to put money in them and spend money on maintaining them. Where, like, when they were worth 10 grand, they were all ratty and beat and rusty and whatever.
the phrase ROI would get thrown about, and then you just can't, especially talking to your spouse or partner, forget it. Try to explain, what's the ROI? Well, it's nothing. It's I'm going to lose a fortune if I do anything with paint or interior or anything other than just some
upside down.
Yeah, but you're right. Now it's not, especially if and nobody knows how high it's going to go. I follow. I'm not disparaging Bring a Trailer at all. I've been following it forever. I love it. That's like a huge source of entertainment for me, without a doubt. But I've seen cars that I've been following it long enough that I've seen cars that were bought off Bring a Trailer in 2016 for what I thought was ridiculous money, had complete refurbished, especially in the 911 market, complete refurbishments and stuff like that, where I'm like, what are you even thinking? And now selling for a profit. So, nobody knows. If you say you're full of crap. We don't know how. It doesn't make any sense, but it's happening. And and the Urquattro is still very interesting, because I'm still amazed at how cheap they go overall relative to like an E30, and same with the 190 Cosworth. It's the Urquattro, especially for North America. I mean, the numbers are tiny. They compared to E30, they're like a tenth of the the number of E30 M3s that came over, and they're it's a homologation special. It's its pedigree and provenance is like undisputable. It's not, this may sound like sacrilege. It's not a great car to drive on the street. I mean, it's not fast. It's not light. It's not fun. It doesn't turn in like but an E30 M3 is the same thing. People don't, God's Chariot and everything. I've had 3 of them, and the only one that I ever really enjoyed was the one that I did an S50 swap in, because they're slow. You have to, if you want to drive it on the street, you got to change the steering rack. You got to put a Z3 rack. The stock rack is 3.6 turns lock to lock.
Is it really?
3.6 turns in a little 2,800 pound car like that, because they're built for long, tracks. Right. And the Z3 is 2.7, the 1.9 liter is. And it just changes the whole, it now is, it's not like a Mitsubishi Evo, but it is, turns in, it feels good relative to the power that's there. But it's a thrashy motor, even though it has a balance shaft, it'll rev to $7,000. It doesn't sound great doing it. It's what it represents and how it looks and all that. And it's an old flexible chassis, even though these things were all, seam welded and everything. It's rose colored glasses for, a lot of people who are, buying these cars on Bring a Trailer. And it makes you wonder, have they ever driven these cars that they're seeking? Have they ever sat in one? And what's it like once it actually shows up, because it really is not what you're expecting. At least the Urquattro, that sounds amazing, that 5-cylinder.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It is, even the 10 valve too, I mean, it's
arguably the 10 valve sounds even better. It's funny. I haven't really had a chance to drive this one much yet. When I got it out of the warehouse, it sat for years in the warehouse after I bought it. And then I got it recently, and it was having just running issues. Just running around my property was hard. So like it's down at nothing leaves stock now, getting kind of sorted.
Oh, but yeah, Josh will take care of that.
Yeah, he's
great. Like new 5-cylinder though. Be careful. He loves the
that's
five cylinders. It may show up in there.
So we've been debating that. So do you do a if it's your car, do you keep the 10 valve? I think from an investment standpoint, maybe better with the 10.
Rebuild it, put it on a stand, make it look good, but get that out of there. You're going to drive and have fun, right?
Yeah.
Get that out of there. Put an
07K.
Yeah. Or a Daz. I mean, you could do a Daz, but that's the way you can build a 7K to, any power output that you want, is because I've fooled around. I've got a lot of experience with that motor, and I love it. I'm even thinking of an old, and now people have. I want to put one in a Mark III or Mark II, and they fit no problem. But if you're going to go, you have to do a shorter. I think it's the driver's side axle, because otherwise it doesn't clear the passenger chassis leg. Well, and so you have to move it a little bit, and that for all-wheel drive makes it more of a challenge from the the rear prop shaft. And I want all-wheel drive, but I love that engine. That's so easy to modify, and they're freaking everywhere, man. They're so cheap.
Yeah, if I now talking about that, I think you were the first. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were the first. I remember you hitting me with this harebrained idea you had of like look, they put the 07K in the Beetle. I want to put it in. I don't even remember what you were putting in.
Mark
Like,
Mark
was
one
it a Mark
TT.
one?
Yeah, and it just did the research. Yeah, they put it in the Beetle, and the cool thing about that is it wasn't a Mark. It was a Mark IV wiring harness. The Beetle's, is a Mark IV chassis basically. So it didn't, the Mark V cars like the Golf and the Jetta came with the 5-cylinder, but for the harness, it's one piece from headlight to taillight. In the Beetle, it's a separate engine harness. So to me, I'm like, oh wow, okay, that's all I need.
Right.
And and we turboed it and everything. It was just, for me, the challenge, it was tough to get, because this was in Florida. The AC was different. The new Beetle had a it wasn't a clutched AC compressor like the Mark IV car. So that was the thing that was a huge pain in the butt for me. But other than that, oh my God, that thing was fast. It sounded amazing. That's how a TT should be. And believe me, I'm thinking, because Mark I TT values are going up.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Potential business model to throw out there. Somebody wants to start buying those up, restoring them, make them nice. They'll make a little money for themselves. That car still speaks to me. The interior of that car is still like one of the most perfectly special minimalist interiors that ever. And it doesn't look dated at all.
The other side is the material quality of it. Like I remember when I have a friend, I won't say who he is, but like one of the guys I know now at Audi used to work at Mercedes. And he said when that car came out, like he was at Mercedes and he remembers somebody brought one by and the Mercedes, this is in Stuttgart, and they're going through it. Like, how did this, like, it was a PX special where like PX signed off on it. It was like, yeah, make those solid aluminum bezels. Great. Just do it.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
Like there's no way that would have made it past, like in a post PX era. There's no way that interior would have made it to production.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I think I definitely would like to have another one. I'm 6'4", but I fit in it. No problem.
Right.
Visibility is great. You're sitting in a bathtub, but it's the potential, it's a Mark IV chassis, but we've worked on them, and we had a customer who raced one in a NASA class, and we took it as, between that and like the Golf, the Mark IV R32, they're, the front suspension's different, the geometry is different. You could make one of those cars turn in, you can make one of it rotate without a lot of work and fabrication. There's just parts on the shelf for that. It's a really satisfying little car.
Yeah.
I just can't stand the 1.8T. I'm sorry. That engine has never felt very good to me. Never sounded good enough. I like the 2-liter turbos. Direct injection was, a huge change for how, we could bump up compression ratios and get throttle response and turbo,
right,
at the same time. But I just, that 5-cylinder is so good. It really is.
I think Josh has built at least one, maybe more, like 07K turbo TTs now.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I found one recently. Same thing. I've got a full garage, so I can't really have a hard time selling my wife on allow me to bring home another, puppy. But I found a couple months ago. I'm still kicking myself over this. I found it. It looked a little like it needed a little work, but it was a factory Nagaro Mark I TT 3.2. And I was like, so like I'm 05, whatever it was, but like I literally called Anthony Garbus at Audi and was like, can you verify that this thing is, it looks in the pictures like Nagaro? Is it? He's like, check the VIN, it is Audi exclusive, like, which was kind of MIA back then. You didn't really see it happening.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we're getting close that like what the first year of production on TT is 98, 99?
99. Yeah. It's
99. So we're 2 years away from the European market cars starting to open up, and I guess another year to Quattro.
Right.
So we'll see. But I'm at like, when Europe opens up as easily importable, then you start getting some other weirdo spec, like the factory pole position seats and
their version of our ALMS special or anniversary, whatever. Yeah. With the no back seat, like half cage.
Oh, the Quattro Sports, and yeah.
But just imagine what they'll go for. It's just be like RS2 money or something, man.
Gosh, I hope not. RS2s have gotten insane.
Yeah, but I get it. That's like, that's an icon. That's like one of the most special cars ever to me. That's why, my driver's edition, Mark III VR6s were always, built. I had Porsche brakes, Porsche Cup 1 wheels on them, and even a little, RS2 little badge below the taillight, all red taillights, and they were always, jazz blue, which is exactly the same. And this debate goes on forever. It's exactly the same color code as Nogaro blue. Nogaro blue has a different clear coat with a little bit more what's the word I'm looking, the metallic.
Pearl?
It's not metallic, it's
like a pearl.
I can't totally pearl effect in German. Yeah. But the base is exactly the same. So to me, it's like when Volkswagen offered a jazz blue Mark III VR6, I had to have it. And if we had a variant, the wagon man,
right?
And again, I went to Essen and saw them. They had it was a jazz blue 2.9 synchro Mark III Golf variant color concept. So it had the Recaro seats with the blue centers, not Alcantara like the RS2, but leather. And it's like, oh my God, just lower that and put that on some Cup 1s and I'm in heaven.
Yeah.
And you can get, the variants. There are a bunch of companies making them here, but the 2.9 VR6 Synchro is a really, really special car.
You know what though, surprisingly, did they just not sell that many? Like I watch Autoscout 24 and mobile.de and like the other German and European kind of auto trader sites, and they have a really wonderful selection. Those sites where like our auto trader and cars.com is all like anything older than 10 years gets really thin really fast. Right.
Yeah.
But over there, the vintage cars and race cars and whatever are still pretty prevalent. But I see a ton of Mark IIIs and I see a ton of Mark IIIs I'd love to get my hands on, right? Like the anniversary GTIs and like you just don't see a lot of VRs and like a VR variant would be, I can't imagine they sold many.
Money. They were crazy money back in the day. They were almost like twice the price of a 1.4 liter Mark III. They were ridiculously expensive, so that's why they just didn't sell. And once you're in that, it was totally BMW money or Audi money and stuff like that. So I'm not surprised they didn't sell many. And they were special to me as a North American because I couldn't get it. But the 2.9 was 190 horsepower versus 178, and and the Synchro was not quattro. It's a viscous.
It was still viscous coupling.
Yeah.
Right.
So
like what's in the Rally Golf.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what Synchros, it depends on the chat, like with the Quantum, that was quattro, that was a Torsen, but
depending
on which way the engine went, north and south or east or west.
So that's, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure you're deeper knowledge on the Volkswagen stuff. So if it's longitudinal, it's well, the earlier Quattro and then later Torsen, like the B5 Passats would have had the same Audi as the Audi system. Yep. But if it's transverse, it's Synchro up until Mark IV, at which time they go to Haldex, and that's continues to today.
Yeah, and then
with evolutions
like Touareg and stuff like that's different, the SUVs. But for the passenger cars, yes, that is true. It's just a marketing thing between 4Motion and Quattro or Synchro back in the day.
Yeah, Quantum Synchro wagons getting kind of rare too. Like well, they don't hold value like the Audis do. But
no, and it was so much more car. It's a bigger car, and you always got the 5-cylinder and better wheels, and they were really nice inside. Those were it's funny because Passats like that have been here. Like the B5 Passat was always like so nice, and in some ways nicer than the B5 A4 is a bigger car.
Right.
They even made a W8 version and all that. I mean, it was just crazy the way Volkswagen has dabbled, thrown shit at the wall in the North American market. And
I think a lot of that was Piech, right? Like Piech was, my understanding, somebody told me a story once about him that there was some diesel motor. It wasn't, believe it or not, it wasn't the W8, it wasn't the VR5. There was some diesel motor where like they were sitting there with the financial analysts and they were like, it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense. We can't afford it. It's not going to get developed. And he literally pulled his own checkbook out. He was like, I want it to happen. Right. So, and he's the kind of guy who could, and what I always love, but for whatever bad may have, people may have thought of Piek, and he was certainly an interesting and very robust personality.
Yeah.
But like he is you can single-handedly point to him and say he is one of the reasons like they were able to be as agile as they were through that period and try some of the weird things they did, that, the Phaeton, the W12. And honestly, that one was brilliant because I think he was able to get so many OE suppliers to bid on this new luxury Volkswagen.
Right.
And then so many of those parts went right into that Bentley.
Yeah. And building the factory, and they're buying into the whole factory that he did there too. So yeah, those were real interesting times. And of course, we were working together. I was, editorial director at that time, and in the press pool rotation. So I had my share of Phaetons, and single-handedly my wife's favorite car out of everyone. And I had an A8 W12 too. She liked the VW better. She liked the seats. She liked the interior. She liked the weight of it, the heft. It weighed. Yeah. The A8's aluminum. The VW wasn't. It was like almost 2,000 pounds more, and it just felt amazing. And I love that it just, to everybody else, especially in South Florida, it's a big Passat. I like that. That appeals to me. It's like that's really cool. My 120, because it was the 4-seater, which made even less sense, in that car, that you could pay an extra $12,000 to remove one of the rear seats. But it gave you these, cool, like kind of recline, so it was a total executive car. But the double pane windows, the disappearing vents, the non-directional airflow, it was.
Piek didn't like drafts. That was totally a Piek thing. Yeah.
Yes, that car was epic. The engineering in that, and it's like, man, it was fun. It was fun getting those cars back then, and everything was, different. You never knew what Volkswagen was going to do next, and we were getting some of the Euro stuff. We were getting some of the stuff, but not anymore, man. No.
Well,
the ID Buzz. That, to me, that's just. I'm sorry, but it's to not bring over the short wheelbase version to America just because we love big cars and stuff like that. They're missing a nit. It's a personalization thing. That kind of appeals to people. Not everybody wants to drive a minivan.
So I have a guess on that one. Is that the Tiguan's probably going to throw away my guess and make it wrong. But my theory here is they've got, with any of the times they're federalizing these vehicles, right? They probably have a limited number of slots to federalize. And so that's where you see certain cars, like TT, its time is numbered because it just doesn't do volume. In today's market, it's just not. And which is a shame because it's a wonderful car. But I guess where I'm going with that is if they were choosing to bring one, the long wheelbase probably makes.
When it's an either or proposition, I get that. I'm just disputing the fact that it needs to be an either or, that some more effort should be put into having both here, because the short wheelbase cargo version also is going to be, appealing to a lot of smaller shops who don't need the bigger one, just like the Transit Connect versus the Transit, that's a real, niche.
But do you think, if I have to think that vehicle is going to be wildly successful, and if it is, then it seems like it's only a matter of time before the short wheelbase arrives.
I hope so, because I love it. I would quite potentially buy a short wheelbase one, but there's no way in hell I'm going to buy the long one. I don't want something that big. I don't need it. Now there's some saying that, the short wheelbase version was never built to accommodate the dual motors, which I can't believe. That makes no sense to me, but that's some of the rumor out there. So, because America needs, we need the extra motor and the more power and all that. In America, people view electrification in a vehicle as a performance enhancement. That instant torque. That's a big marketing thing. Europe, not so much. It's all range. It's only about range over there.
Is the short wheelbase rear wheel drive?
Yeah.
So the motor's in the rear and the short wheelbase.
It's the ID4 chassis, and it's like the base ID4 with the rear engine. The rear motor only.
I don't understand why the long wheelbase wouldn't work though, because it wouldn't house both motors, just because even the Q4, which is.
I'm saying there was some saying that the short wheelbase version, which I don't, because the ID4 has dual motors too, that has that option. So it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just curious with that vehicle too. It kind of makes me think about the potential of like an A2 style vehicle that was way ahead of its time as well, like the Audi A2, not the
Right.
Mark II.
Yeah.
But like the pandemic especially got me to thinking, we have an e-tron in my household. It's a great car. We didn't have to go to the gas station at all during the pandemic. It was just
Right.
leave the gas cars sit and we just charge at home. We don't have to deal with the public. But like that got me to thinking of like so many of my friends here who are like, some of my friends who are like well off and have big houses, but they don't have like an office in the house, right? And they're in some cases still working from home, and they're playing in like some weird space in their basement where their kids are wrestling and fighting with each other in the background and whatever else. And like to be able to have like a vehicle like the ID Buzz or like some sort of like more utilitarian box that you could drive to like a Starbucks or something and like plug in and just run your climate control all day, right? And Wi-Fi, either be on Starbucks Wi-Fi or your own in the vehicle. And like, it's literally a roving office. I have a buddy who during the pandemic bought a T3, like a Vanagon. He lives in Maine, and he they've been camping a lot. And when his kids are at ballet or whatever else, he just works out of the back of the Vanagon. And it's during the pandemic, it was a relief to not be around human beings, right? Like
well, that's what, Projectzwo, that's, Projectzwo,
right.
the company.
That's
how they made their name, was in modifying,
T4s.
the T3, T4, and then they're still doing it. And most of them were mobile offices. Those were, executive cars. They built them out with full office, and flat screens and stuff. And, it was pretty advanced even back in the day. And the Germans do that. They want to work all the time. They sit in traffic just like we do and want to be able to work. So, and it's got the space. But yeah, the ID Buzz, absolutely. The fact that it can power itself is,
I mean, honestly, the e-tron has been, I remember going to, right after we got the car, my wife was out of town and we took it to like it was a really cold morning, like a soccer tournament that my oldest daughter was in. And we get there, and because my wife's not with us and I'm an idiot, we get there and my youngest one gets out of the car and she's like, I'm cold, like get your jacket. Like, I don't have a jacket with me. So literally I stuck her with her iPad in the car and I just ran the climate control off the app. And like for, 2.5 hours, she's just hanging out, doing whatever on her iPad and like perfectly comfortable.
Yep.
And 2.5 hours on running heat, you're not going to run much power down. So like, she could just hang out, and that's literally what it was that day. The problem is like, even the e-tron is just, it's a conventional SUV, right? So it's not like, while I've sat in it and worked while I wait on my kids at soccer practice and stuff, to have something where I could like flip the seats around or have a pop-up table or whatever else would just be phenomenal. So I think it's a whole new market, and I'm curious to see what other vehicles come of like, they talk about like what's the one they're working on? That's like the A8 replacement. And I think Porsche was in on it, whatever else.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name of it, but like these vehicles that like could be something other than just a car. I don't know. That's the side of electric cars that really excite me. Like, cause it kind of opens up the paradigm in a way that like none of us have really thought of or perfected yet.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's cool having other people, like, software engineers working, how they see cars and transportation and lifestyle and ergonomics and stuff like that versus, the people who have been doing it forever with, the ICE cars. It's pretty cool. I mean, sometimes it's goofy as hell because that's their perspective, but look at my perspective. So it doesn't always, mesh together, but it is cool. We're getting new opportunities, and there is going to be fun. There's definitely going to be fun with that kind of, torque and everything, and the low center of gravity. There's absolutely fun.
That's the magic, right? I think at that point, you were talking earlier about Tesla and whatever else. The problem with Tesla or most electrics, including my e-tron, is at the moment there's such an expectation on range, and energy density is only so good in today's batteries. And so to do any sort of expected range, you're talking about a big pig of a car. It's heavy. Right. The e-tron, I believe, is somewhere around 400 pounds heavier than an SQ7. So like a loaded out V8 twin turbo SQ7, smaller e-tron and still more heavy. Like it's while it corners very flat, you get it into a corner and you can't really disguise that weight, right? Like it's the all-wheel drive system works pretty well, but you're still pushing a lot of weight around a corner.
Tires can only grip so much. Yeah.
Right. And like like to take it out to the track, like the braking and the tires, you're gonna.
Yeah.
So I that's where I'm curious to like who jumps in. It might be Lotus. I think I'm curious who who gets to it first, but like who actually does a sports car for driving performance versus like you must go 200 miles or else you're laughable, or 300 I think is the expectation by some people when I have conversations about my e-tron.
I know, it's like people, they have these expectations for electric cars that they don't have for their own cars. It's, you know, for gas cars, it's like they drive with the full tank. They have to have a full tank all the time. We don't do that, you know. I don't. And especially my 911 with the, you know, with the gas tank up front, you know, and it holds 15, 16, 17 gallons. It's like the difference between a full tank on a rear engine car without power steering, you know, and a half, you know, almost empty tank it's huge. I mean, it totally is. So if I don't even do it in that car like that because I know the difference, but people do that. And it's all about range because they have, you know, the anxiety about where they're going to be able to recharge. And I know that happens sometimes, but I gotta believe, you know, it's almost a non-issue for 99% of the time because, you know, I understand if you live in a condo or, you know, somewhere where you can't plug in when you're home, totally different. I get that. But, you know, having to have 300 miles and more of range or make it a non-starter, that means that, yes, you're carrying all that weight just for that what if thing.
Right.
Like having a full tank of gas all the time. And, you know, that's just not the way cars get used, not in reality. So
I think that's what we found, right? Like 90, we found after a year and a half, whatever point we ran out of our free, like, because you get a certain amount of charging from Audi, at least you did when we bought our e-tron. That's what you get, right?
Right.
And it took
Charge America,
right. So like it was, what we found was that maybe 10% of our charging is public charging, right? Like is rapid, whatever. And like, if I'm on a long road trip, and we've taken the car to Maine and to Wisconsin and whatever, like if I'm on a long trip like that, charging, I want it by the highway and fast. But like beyond that, I'm charging at my house. Net, I've saved more time with that vehicle than I have my gas because I'm, you know, 5 to 10 minutes, you know, gassing up my ICE car versus, you know, 1 in 10 chargings being 20 minutes, but otherwise irrelevant, right? Because I'm sleeping or working or whatever. Like it's
big picture is not. It's hard for a lot of people to get because they haven't experienced it yet. So over time, I think they will. I think they'll get it. I think you'll have, you know, the infrastructure hopefully will keep up.
That's the trick.
With gas out here is $6 a gallon.
Is it really?
Yeah, and up starts at 6. I think, you know, even with that, there's not a huge rush to buy electric cars. It's, you know, they're still expensive relative to, you know, ICE cars, and their availability isn't that awesome. You know, selection isn't that awesome. So it's going to take time, and I think, you know, the infrastructure has some time to try and catch up. And then once you don't have that anxiety of, you know, where it's almost as easy as getting gas, you know, and you can go with fast charging, you know, a modern electric vehicle can go from like 10% to 80% in like, you know, 10, 15 minutes, which is not much different than getting gas going in and, you know, using the restroom. You know, it's not a huge factor, I think.
When we did Maine, one is my kids can't outlast the range of the car. 200 miles, actually, with 4 of us in the car. Yeah, they're not. We're actually probably at about 180 with the bikes and everything, like loaded up, like we're going to. So like, that's one thing, is I'm stopping that often anyway. Yes, the challenge right now is finding fast chargers. Like I have to pre-trip it, like plan it out and know where I'm going, so that but you know, when they're ubiquitous and at every exit, it should be no problem whatsoever. And it's already changed so much in the 2 years we've had the car. So like, I don't really, the other thing I find is like, I don't know about you, if I'm on a long trip with my family, if I'm in my gas car, I'm usually like, I'm out to set a record, right? Like I want to, like I'm trying to move fast. I've got ways up.
Gotta make time.
Right. And they're like, I gotta go to the bathroom. Like shit, you know, and you know, you're in and out, back on the road. And like with the e-tron 1 is like, I can't really push them to get back in the car too fast because, you know, it needs like 15, 20 minutes. And the other side of it is I find with regenerative battery or regenerating braking, like if I'm in traffic, I just don't care. I put it on, like, you know, put it on the autonomous mode, and it's doing its thing. If the guy in front of me is like annoying on his brakes, again, it doesn't really matter. It's regenning.
Right.
I get stressed if I'm like touching the brakes or I'm like, come on, man, just get out of my way.
Yeah.
And I'm less stressful a driver that my family doesn't mind. They actually prefer it because I'm not pushing that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife would relate to that. Totally.
Yeah.
She knows where the oh shit handle is in all of my cars.
Yeah. Do you usually get the, like, would you really stop riding this person that closely?
Oh, I get all that, but it doesn't, she knows that she's, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. There are times where she's like, how did you know that he was going to do that? How did you know to be over there? And it's like the whole merging thing, and where she wants to get over right away, and it's like, nope, I'm a zipper guy. No, and if you're not going to be part of the zipper, I'm going to show you. I'm going to start the zipper. And she's like, yeah, but people hate that. So I don't care.
But it's efficient, right? Like
they're doing it wrong. And
it's situational awareness. Yeah. It's funny. Like I had a buddy who his kid's 16 and he got into 2 different accidents where I think like in the first year, but got rear-ended both times. So he's like, oh, it's not his fault. It's like, no, it's not. But like, if you have situational awareness, right, like you're probably going to be able to get out of that situation. Like if you're watching, anytime I'm stopped in traffic, I'm watching the rear view, right? Like
especially so like here, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was driving Ken Block's Focus on the 10 freeway, and I couldn't get out of it. Some kid in a purple Honda Civic just plowed right into the back of me and then pushed me into a Camaro, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe this. Ken.
Oh no.
Yeah, and it's like, because I'd taken it to an event, and then I was just going with a friend of mine was in town, and we were going up to Santa Monica or something just to show him. But yeah, situational awareness is everything until you can't do anything about it. And I was watching, going, like,
right. No, sometimes you can't, right? But like what you're saying is like when your wife's like, how did you know it was going to do that? It's like, well, because if you're paying attention, if I could play the stock market like I can watch traffic, I'd be a rich man.
Exactly. We are rambling on today, aren't we?
We are, yeah. Well, thanks, man.
Two friends and co-workers who haven't done this, and it's like, I don't know how entertaining it is for the audience necessarily, but I'm digging it. I missed this.
Covering a lot of bases. Yeah. Well, so T4s, speaking of Projectzwo, have you now that T4s are old enough to import, have you thought about a T4?
No, those just never did anything for me. No. I go up to the Hoonigan, once they stopped being rear engine, it just kind of lost it for me. Like, cause I've, a 3-liter 3.2 Carrera motor, goes in the back of a Hoonigan really nicely. Everybody's doing Subaru motors, but I'd love, Porsche air-cooled motor in back one of those. And I mean, we used to see that. We'd go to the Nürburgring and see these guys. Yeah. There was a ring taxi,
Hoonigan
with a 911 SC 3-liter motor in it at one point in the 80s. And it's like, to me, that's the cool thing.
It's cool, but the dad in me has a problem with cab over, right? Like I'm just waiting for something to happen, right? And like this, you're right up there. And
I know, yeah, but I don't know. Millions of Germans been doing it forever, and they're, I don't know how many have died, but
yeah, but Germans actually have traffic etiquette and train really hard to drive, and like here you just have kids like this, like driving down the street, just
But not after the Berlin Wall came down and all the East Germans and their Trabants and Wartburgs and everything started going on the Autobahn and outside of Frankfurt and stuff. Then it was, I was over there when that was happening, and there was grisly accidents because lane discipline was not a thing.
I remember like it's probably one of the first times I went over with Fundreska, and we started it was right after Autostadt opened. And then we had to get down to Ingolstadt. And for whatever reason, we're like, let's go east towards Berlin and then south. I think that seemed like the play. But I remember like once we got past where this would have been 99, I think. So when did the wall come down? Early 90s?
91, I think.
So
something like that.
I don't know, in reunification, it was shortly thereafter, right? Reunification. Right. But like I remember being like in Eastern, what was then Eastern Germany, you'd still see like kind of like blown out like World War II damaged era houses that
Yep.
were like, I'm sure are long gone now, but those first few years were, you know,
Oh,
it
and
was
the car
dicey with.
scene, yeah, the car scene was radically different. It was Trabants were everywhere, and there were two-stroke smoke and everything like that. Yeah, it was really bizarre back then. It was, I can only imagine how it was for the country
Yeah.
itself, especially West Germans. You know, I know a lot of
Imagine
people
how,
were against it, but
I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, but you see how like kind of ugly things have gotten the last few years, whether pandemic or politics or anything else. I'm sure, I know from having been there those years, the Germans were certainly stressed about reunification because you have so many resources going into the East to
yep,
try and prop it up and get it up to speed. But
yep.
could you imagine us trying to do something like that? Like at that level of, we must, you know, in order for us all to succeed, we must put all this money here. And like America, like whichever side had the money would be like, no, they can suffer.
That's where secession becomes the word of the day,
right?
All over the place, and we'll be a country, a federation of several independent states.
Yeah, hopefully not. But you never know. As dumb as things have gotten over COVID and everything else.
I could see a red and blue say, you red people go there, you blue people go there, and you know, hopefully don't have a war.
You know, okay, so one of the other things I miss about those years, if you were over in, you say you went to Frankfurt 93?
92, yeah.
92. I was there every 2 years, yeah. So I think 99 was my first year. I don't know how that adds up if you were there in 92.
Okay, yeah, no, I was 91 because the Mark III came out in 92, and so I was there for 91. So yeah, it was a lot of years, yeah.
But what I miss about those years, and I wonder if it was like that in 91, but like in 99, you know, you had the Frankfurt mess or whatever, you know, and you had like Mercedes had built their own building, and then there were the different show halls and whatever. And I remember like, it was just amazing how endless it was, whether it was like here, the second floor of like the whatever hall Ferrari was in was like all OE suppliers. And the second floor of like the hall that Volkswagen Group was in was all like Opt and like all the aftermarket, like all the German aftermarket was there. And it was such a magical thing, right? Because if whatever you're a fan of, they had, you know, whether it was like model car, like Herpa or Mini Champs or whatever, vendors for that. Like it was such a carnival of the automotive industry.
And like the week before was Auto Mechanica was in there too.
Right.
And it was, so it was crazy. And then Edison would be
like
that as well.
Rad.
Yeah.
I just miss that. Auto shows are on such a decline now. And of course,
that is sad. It used to be such a thing that, you know, Chicago, you know, Detroit, brave that January weather. Now, you know, people, and they did it. We had to. You had to go to them. You know,
right.
We're in one building, you know, in Detroit, and you had to go there.
So Detroit in January was hardly, but I still loved it. Like it was such a great time to be.
Oh yeah.
To be there and to be with like everybody in the industry. The part of me wonders how that works, right? Like it was such a social time too for like, remember you did Detroit several times, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like the days after the show at like the Chrysler bar at the where they would like take over that firehouse across the street.
Firehouse,
and like everybody who's anybody was there, right? And Dr. Z is like slinging beers to people, and like it was such a unique time. I'm very happy to have been part of it, but at the same time, it's just so like New York's coming up here in the next couple of weeks, and I saw we were debating whether or not to go. Audi's not there. I heard the ID Buzz might be, but I looked at the like press conference list, and it's like 3 known manufacturers, and everything else was kind of hit or miss, or like startup electric that I've never heard of or whatever. So like it's hard to watch because I guess things are in Monterey and whatever now, but
but yeah, like you said, it was the social, it was the after hours stuff, and you could mention, you know, projects. I mean, things got rolling that way. Things that we, you know, for all we know, that's where the, you know, the Dodge Viper came from, or the Prowler, you know, based on just stuff like that. You know, just a couple drinks and like, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we, you know, that you just don't do online, and it doesn't work in email like that. It's the personal nature of it. I definitely miss that. It's so impersonal now. I think people are having as much fun with cars as they used to. I really don't. That's too bad.
In some ways, I think it's more I think the aftermarket still does. Like SEMA to me reminds me much of SEMA when in those days.
Right.
It's just, I mean, still as a wheel manufacturer, I got to ask you. I meant to ask you this earlier. How is it possible that there are this many god awful ugly wheels in the world? Like I walk through that wheel hall and I'm like, how?
I got
So much of it is irrelevant to me.
Very careful with my response.
Okay.
So I'm probably just gonna just pass that one. But there's
All
you know
right.
there's a wide spectrum of automotive tastes out there, and each of them has disposable income. We'll just say that,
Right.
and prioritizes spending it on wheels. So
Yeah.
I wonder the same thing. But I also know when we launched like I think the tarmac on Facebook, and the people who would just go, that's absolutely disgusting. I remember the Subaru guys were the worst, and
Really?
now they bought
Now
more
it's
tarmacs than any other demographic group, except maybe the Ford guys did. But
right.
it's like, how can you say a rally inspired 5-spoke wheel? It doesn't have to be your favorite, but how can you
Right.
say it looks bad on an STI? I don't get it. And that's because they knew us as, oh, that's a Volkswagen wheel. It's like, oh yes,
Yeah.
we're famous for doing VDS. We did the snowflake. That's a Volkswagen wheel. But no, tarmac is not a Volkswagen wheel, and that was our way of getting out of just the VAG, you know, scene at the
Broadening it.
time, because as much as I enjoy it, and that's still where I end up, I'm looking for Mark ones as we speak, and Mark twos,
Are you?
not on Bring a Trailer, okay, but I'm looking for them. And it's, for wheels, you have to get outside that. Nobody makes enough money off the Volkswagen and Audi guys just selling wheels like that. So, or any single brand, it's you got to be out there. But yeah, the wheel halls at SEMA, and especially on the truck side of things, oh my God, it's overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
literally overwhelming. You go there, there's just too many. They're all so similar, or they're all just so blingy.
Yes.
And some of the upscale ones that you would see, and they've toned it down now, but they would have like a full island, like a 150 by 150 square island with just like IKEA bookshelves with wheels in them, and they're it's like jewelry, it's like fine jewelry here, and I don't know. It makes me wonder, because I know they spent X number of dollars for every mold on one of those, and they've made
Right.
a commitment to their manufacturer to purchase a certain minimum quantity. And I look at it and it's like, how are they really gonna? Do they make
All right.
so much with 10% of them that the 90% that are just terrible or okay? I don't get it.
That's kind of what I've wondered sometimes. Like, not all wheel manufacturers in the wheel hall are like that, right? But I would put, for my own design snobbery, like I would probably put 70 to 80% of the wheels I see in the wheel hall are to
Right,
me just not even remotely attractive.
right.
And so that what I wonder when you walk into like the one with like the huge island with all the shelves and all the wheel designs, like, do you think they go there with like prototypes of like, all right, here's everything we have. Let's see what people express interest in, and we'll fulfill orders on those. And otherwise, we'll just say, yeah.
I hope so. They're doing that. But these are, they're in their catalogs. They're showing
Right.
me, so you can't, the timeline, even once you have a full, you've completed a mold and you have your first sample and your testing is complete. Even that period of time from then to making the wheels, having them shipped here and stuff like that is still, often 6 months minimum, 9 months to a year realistically. So I can't see that as being a really, productive business model to do it that way, just based on feedback. I think these are wheels that are, I think they have stock. I think they have some inventory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like anything else, right? Everything's aesthetic and it's a
Right.
subjective call. So what I think is attractive and what the next guy behind me in
Oh, for
the
sure.
aisle thinks is,
Yeah. No, and I see the people there, and all the buyers are there, and they're talking to them and they're looking at stuff and taking pictures and stuff, and it's like it's definitely there's interest. So, and they do it every year, so they stay in business. I mean, I've seen so many wheel companies come and go too.
yeah.
I mean, it's easy to start a wheel company these days, especially when you're focusing on forged, because you can design it on a napkin. You can get the manufacturer's engineer to design it and, productionize it. And then you can get your buddy, say, because you do one set at a time, and you can get your buddy to say, I'll hook you up if you'll pay for this first set of wheels. So it's possible to be a wheel guy manufacturer with zero money out of pocket, and it happens all the time. And then they do a few and they sell a few sets, and it's like, okay, now I'm legit, and they start doing more models, and some of them do really well. I mean, the ones who actually know how to run a business, because it is a business. And
Right.
what you don't realize is, even here in Southern California, that hardly anybody does the wheel finishing in-house. It's outsourced, powder coating and, paint and plating and all that stuff. It's very, it's a dirty business. And,
I'd imagine that's tough in California, especially.
yeah. So there are places that are established, and they, that's all they do, is they do that stuff for, wheel companies and things. So you use them, but it's always a different person, and you never know what you're going to get. And when you send, or, you tell a customer that, they didn't come out great or something like that, they're like, oh, I want my money back, or do it right. When you go back to these finishing places, you're not getting your money back. So you are eating stuff, you are shipping stuff sometimes that doesn't suit the customer's, aesthetic or whatever, and then you're paying to ship it back. I mean, it's very easy. The margins on a set of wheels, on a $3,000 set of wheels, is not nearly what you would think. I mean, cast wheels make way more as a margin, as a percentage. And all it takes is one mistake, and having to pay to ship them back and redo them. And now you're at a loss, you're at a net loss. So it's a tough business, the forged wheel game. So that's why the ones are success, working with the, the luxury cars and, Ferrari and stuff like that, where they're pricing them in there, where their margins are pretty decent, so they can absorb, a lot of the screw ups and things that invariably happen.
Yeah.
Quality control, if you can't, you can't see and touch every product that you sell all the time. There's times where, it just has to go out, and, you're playing the odds, and it sucks when it doesn't go your way, because, you get a very disappointed customer, and they spend a lot of money for, a certain expectation, and you can't deliver on it. That just sucks. That's just a bad feeling all the way around, regardless of the fact that now I'm in a losing, proposition financially. So it's a lot of stress, deadlines, events, things like that. Gymkhana 7, we were assembling wheels the night after, and the turbo fans that we did for Gymkhana 5, those Matt and I were working on with our welder, who was doing them, and he was our fabricator. And then we took him over to our graphics guys, and then we didn't sleep that night. And then we brought him over at like 6 a.m. to the warehouse where they were doing the filming, and put him on the car the first time. And it's funny because they were aluminum, right? And we had a whole bunch of safety things to do it, but they're, these aluminum rib discs on the inside there. I mean, they were fully functional. And as you could tell, like one of the friend of mine, Ron Zaras, he works for Hoonigan, and he worked with Ken on all the Gymkhana stuff. When Ken was at SEMA in the the burn yard thing where he's doing donuts and doing all kinds of cool stuff, Ron got this amazing photo of the Ken's Fiesta, his WRC car. It was the wheels were cocked just a little bit. It's 4-wheel drive, so all 4 wheels are spinning, and it shows the smoke coming out in this perfect pattern that shows how the venting of the as it rotated, the tire smoke coming out of the wheel well. And because that a lot of people think that turbo fans bring in cool air to that's not their function. The BMW, the E34 M5, that was for that, with the throwing stars and everything. But in motorsport application, it's about reducing heat out of there. First of all, adding air into the wheel is not, a good thing aerodynamically. It's
Right.
drag and it's lift. You don't want that. And I'm about to hit a really strong Audi note with this, which was part of why they were banned, why Audi used them on all 4 wheels and the rear wheels, where they didn't have a lot of braking heat, as an issue in the car, because it sucked air out. It's almost, like those Can-Am sucker cars back then.
Right.
It worked. It actually, it added down.
Kept it planted.
Yeah. And they used the hell out of it, and it worked fantastic. But anyway, this photo showed the smoke coming out, tire smoke, and it was just a beautiful thing. But anyway, yeah, I forget who was producing or the director that was working with Brian on that Gymkhana film. He was like, he looked at them and he talked to Matt and me. He's like, these potentially dangerous? Oh, yes, they are. They are. And so he got the crew and everybody together, said, look, I'm about to, we've got, if you see something, say something. If you see this wobble a little bit, and in that video, Ken went through a shipping container, which basically, had this much. And then one of the takes, he did destroy one of the fans on there because it just touched it a little bit and it shattered inside. It's like shrapnel. So yeah, there was a lot of, behind the scenes stuff that was really cool and fun that, almost didn't happen. But yeah, it's a tough business to be in, especially when, now it's, the numbers and everything, like, 1552 is arguably more successful, without me and Matt, from a bottom line thing, but, they're not doing the fun things because it's, it's more professional than when we did it. And
I think that's
okay.
That's what I wrestle with as I've become an old man in this space, is that like there are sort of two sort of motivations. One is in this space, right? One is either for the art of it or the community, and the other is for the profit, right? And while there's certainly plenty of shades of gray in between that, what I wrestle with is like when it gets to profit driven, you lose something, right? And like, so when you say arguably, if you're moving a lot more wheels for SUVs, and again, I'm not trying to beat up on SUVs. I'm still sitting here looking at that Quantum Synchro Wagon Atlas Photoshop, which I will send you. But I guess where I'm going with that is more if just moving more product and generating more profit doesn't necessarily mean it's good for the hobby, or that it builds engagement of the hobby and invests people, car enthusiasts, into the space, right? Another set of wheels on whatever, or OE wheels, then you start moving big numbers too. But like I wrestled with that after we left Vortex, right? I know how they were going to make the investment they made in the sites back, and part of that is now you bring in OEMs and whatever, that like it for me at least, and again, it's kind of like ugly wheels, it's about perspective, and it's a subjective call.
And that's, I want to be clear about, I'm not at all disparaging anything that 1552 is doing right now. It's strictly from me on a personal level, what I found enjoyable, and even too stubbornly at times when we should have been doing,
same here,
more volume stuff to support, the Porsche model, the Boxster and the Cayenne, that saved the 911. You would not have the 911 without those. So you have to do these set, and I wish I could tell you 1552 is about to come out with something that actually is very cool, very niche, but it'll sell, and something I'm really stoked about. So they're still trying to do the enthusiast side of things while being a legit business and scaling. So it's, well,
that's the trick, right? What we had, I go back to like Vortex, and after Vortex, I started chatting with Larry Webster over at Haggerty, and we're now working with Audi Club. And in all of those cases, there was an underlying business that was sort of like a patron of the art, right? So we had the forums at Vortex, and the income that came in from that allowed us the freedom to sort of do what we wanted, playing with motive, whatever we wanted to do, as long as we didn't have profit expectations that I believe really investors tend to bring to a situation. Right? Investors tend to be more disconnected, just like whatever, just stroke me the check, right? And like when you have owners where they see the value of the space, and you have a business that supports it. In Audi Club's case, it's a virtually, it's a nonprofit, so it's virtually public, right? It's not publicly traded. There's not a profit expectation, but there's a membership that supports the business. And so like we can do the magazine, even though a lot of magazines are going out of business. It's one of the ways Haggerty does their magazine too, right? Because they've got the insurance business. They're not relying upon other things. And boy, that's the magic space. Like the magic sauce right now is not having to like turn profitability, because when you do, you're forced to scale up to a level that like sometimes gets lost.
I don't want, we got to a point, we got bigger than what I wanted it to be. Wasn't as fun in that context,
Yeah.
We walked a pretty fine line for a while where we made enough money and and had fun. You just can't do that indefinitely. And when you bring on investors and opportunities come along that you feel like it's almost like your child, what your business, what you create. And when an opportunity comes along, you want to give it that opportunity. You want to go down that road. And sometimes you're happy you did it, other times not as much, but it's hard to, you don't want regret, just like in regular life. As you get older, look back, you don't want to regret the chances and opportunity you take in business the same way. So I'm happy to learn, some things like, okay, and now, as my future business endeavors, which are going to be less, serious than, running a wheel company, as I get older and look at, the rest of my life, what I want to do, I do know I learned some things that I only want it to be, so big with so many people and, fingers in the pie and all that. So it's, it's all, it's just experience and it's good stuff. And, I'm very happy that, I love going over with you how, 1552 started just in a parking lot with this, crazy German guy driving an imported Golf VR6, and it's like, and where it's gone and all the different things have changed. I'm very happy about that, very proud of that. All the different people that I've worked with that have, facilitated that. And still with these RML, wheels that I'm going to do and still be working with 1552, it just seems natural, and this is good for them because they are so sick of, it almost doesn't matter what they post. Somebody in those comments in Instagram or Facebook, when are you bringing the snowflake back? Right. Now they get to say, well, go to RML, RML Snowflake on Instagram, or, RMLwheels.com, and you will see, if you really want them, bug them about it. So it's pretty cool. And they get to say, we are making them for them.
Right.
We're sharing the factory. So it's cool. And being able to still work with Jason, as my engineer, because that's the other thing right now. The first set of wheels we made, the first run, we used the factory's brake data. They said they had the brake data for the cars. We told them the range, and it wasn't what it needed to be. They were challenging to fit on certain cars, and guys had to use spacers. And you're already dealing. A 15x8 is not a necessarily easy bolt-on for a Mark I to begin with. You add spacers to the mix, and that's not what we wanted. So I'm going back to scratch, and Jason and I are we're working on the engineering to the point where we're trying to have better brake clearance, but losing the look of the wheel. Because as you can imagine, the snowflake design has a little bit of concavity to it. Yes. A lot of it's the curvature of the spokes that come out. Some of it's an optical illusion. But if you want to increase the offset, it's hard to do that while maintaining that look. And that's where I'm looking to do Flowform with the new version. Flowform, other companies call them rotary forge and stuff like that. It's not. It's a cast wheel center where the barrel is spun, and it's spun to a point where it arranges the granular structure of the aluminum in like in a stronger pattern. It's not haphazard. It's as you rotate it, you get to decide from an engineering perspective how that is going to be strength wise versus thickness and all that. So it provides for a lighter, stronger barrel. And we're talking the weight on the outside of the wheel, which is the most important. And because they're using a tool to spin it, to shape it, you can vary the width within a certain amount. So whereas the Mark I guys, always wished, not all of them, but a lot of them said, I wish you'd made a 15x7 instead of 15x8, then I could just bolt them on and go, no problems. We're theoretically going to be able to offer 15x7, maybe 7.5 and 8, all from one single mold. So that's really
nice.
yeah. And then we'll move to the 16-inch. I do plan to do. I don't know if we'll get to 18 for sure. We'll see how this goes. I do want to do the teardrop because I have the engineering already done on that. So I don't know where the sample wheel is, but I think that's a good something that will sell. So yeah, it's just really cool to be going back to that and still dealing with the guys there. And
are you going to stay primarily in the Volkswagen space? Are you looking to
no, I can, RML has enough potential that it just means, retro modern line. And
right.
It's just, it's basically the Singer mentality, reimagining, older things to work in modern times and appeal to a modern sensibility. So that's, that's could be anything. But as far as wheels goes, yeah, I could see a lot of people already do it. This isn't a brand new concept.
Right.
You can buy, a Fox body Mustang, the 5-spoke, 16-inch wheels that came on the LX, you can get those in 17 and 18. And that's
right.
that's the same concept. And you can get them 4 or 5 lug. So people have been doing it. But I think there is some untapped potential. I've got my list, my whiteboard of all the different ones, and I've researched that no one is catering to them doing that. So, that's definitely on my list, and that's outside the VW Audi world. But
yeah, it's,
what's
funny.
What Audi wheel do you think would be outside of that Snowflake? Is there another one? The Ronals are, that's so tempting. And that was something I originally thought of, like a 16x8, from the.
So that, I think that's where I was going to go with that question, or with the question I was about to ask you is, the trick is finding, if somebody's done something or doing something. 3STM does a 16-inch version of the Ronal, right?
Right.
And it's pretty accurate. I have a set. I haven't put them on the car yet. But what's funny too is like I've seen them on other cars now, and I'm like, I don't even like. I'm starting to, the old man in me is starting to go back to like, I just want the original.
Yeah.
Right. But like but like so that they 3STM does that, or the Scotto just did the S1E2 speed line with rotiform. Like, so you start to wonder like what other wheels are like obscure but would be rad in like a more aggressive diameter, right? I think of like, well, both Mark 1 and Mark 2 Scirocco, like I don't know what the name is, the Mark 1, but or like the Tarantulas that are on the early Mark 2s. And then the Tarantula is one that like I think is like would be such a badass wheel if it weren't so utterly tiny, right? Like it's only ever
13. They didn't even make a 14. So it's I don't think. I mean, somebody somewhere is going to point out that South Africa got a 14 or something. I don't know, but I'm not aware of it. And so even a 15 is a +2, which is, potentially problematic because, it doesn't look the same when, you got to keep the proportions, but you have to grow it. You have to grow it proportionally. Right. So spokes don't just get longer, they get thicker as you're doing that. Right. So a +2 is a pretty aggressive, but then again, we went +4 with a Snowflake in that 18. It worked great.
Yeah. I think Tarantula to me is one that I have always wondered what it would like. It's just photoshopping. I'm curious what it would look like big, but like whether it's that or if I go to trying to think the Audi space, what is cool and highly sought after now, but hard to find is the actually no, yeah, nobody's done that yet. No, I hadn't even thought of that. No, that would be interesting. The other thing that not for the Quattros, but going further down the line, right, age-wise, getting younger than the Quattro is the Avis and the in particular, like the fat Avis that was on the S6. Well, one of the popular mods that are very hard to find nowadays are like the later 18-inch Avis that was on like the pre-facelift S8 that we didn't get, right? Like the first gen S8, the Ronin car,
right?
Those car, like there are a lot of people doing those on older, particularly like S2s and S6s.
Yep.
And it looks amazing, but like getting them and getting the correct caps and everything else it's all so obsolete heavy at this point.
They're so heavy. So yeah, you do a flow form you can do an 18 like that, you bulky spoke design, and you can still get it under 25 pounds, which is, for a strong, cast road wheel, That's
Yeah.
not bad. As opposed to them, most of them are over 30 pounds from the factory.
I was surprised. Rotiform did an Avis like the S or the B6 Avis. It's concave, but it's very close to that. And I've been surprised how many people are like, it does really well. I've seen some RS6 owners and whatever putting it on. And I just think that first generation Avis that was kind of on the Avis concept car.
Yeah.
Like that to me is so classic Audi and in a way that they've done evolutions of Avis, but that gen was like the cool one.
Agreed. Yeah.
The other one that I've gone to old Volkswagen is my sister had an 89 Cabriolet that had that kind of, I think it was also a 6-spoke. It was very flat and it just had a flush flat, like lug cover, but it looked like if you were a designer drawing a wheel, it was literally just like, like it was so simple and it looked so good. But that's another one where like that in like a +1 or a +2 would probably look amazing.
Oh, it looked great. You just wonder how, and it's like, I have to be careful, especially if I just do a million Volkswagen. It's like, then I'm competing against myself and I'm diluting, the big time. There's a static number of customers and that pool isn't that huge. So
for sure,
you have to keep that in mind. And I would love to do all of them. And I'd like to be known for that. I'd love to have a website that shows them all like that and you pick and choose, but it's like, I just can't see that working.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, I've been amazed at the feedback just of making these snowflakes again. That's going to be pretty sweet to be able to say that, I did that and they're out there and I didn't lose money on it, hopefully. And, maybe it'll be even more compelling that people will. And the cool thing about VW guys is it's like, they're not just going to always have one set. Like if I do I've already told me, I'll get a set of snowflakes and a set of teardrops.
Yeah.
And run them, at different times. So I just love, I just love that community is I have a Porsche 911. I love it. I love the community and everything, but it's still, my roots. It's like, it's like Scotto. He can have anything he wants. His Swallowtail Mark I is like, he's like
one of his favorite cars
now. And I will have snowflakes on that soon. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. And that's Vortex, the effect of Vortex on so many people in the industry. It's like, because when we started working with Ken and Ken Block and his team, you had all these guys, Matt DeSillo, who was his, he was his team business manager, a lot of the guys on the team, his co-driver, Alex and everything. They're all VW Vortex kids. We were all on Vortex. It was all, and even Ken, it's like,
was he really?
We're dealing with Fords, we're dealing with all this stuff, but we all come from that background where we all had, Mark 1, Mark 2s, Mark 3s, and it's like, what was your screen name on Vortex? And it's like, well, which time, after I got banned several times, I had several, we were all jackasses back then because we were kids, but it was just, it's funny how Volkswagen of all brands in this country had that, that effect, that huge community aspect that is still around. I mean, I don't know how active it is. I go in the car lounge all the time. I don't go in the other forums because I have a lot of friends who are still in the car lounge and stuff. And I still get a lot of my automotive news in there.
Do you really?
Yeah, just detailed stuff, not first glance stuff like we used to get.
Right.
But I will definitely have times where I go in there just to goof around when I have some extra time and everything. But it's like just the what Vortex is still, it still comes up. It's still relevant.
Yeah, no, it's hard for me, right? For me, Vortex is it's a little bit like your ex-girlfriend, right? You hope she does well, but like you don't want to see her with another dude.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I just don't go back. I miss it though. I think I was listening to Farah's podcast recently and I heard somebody mention the car lounge and was like, man, I missed that. I think it was Spinelli. And it was like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
There was that period where like if something went on the car lounge, like it was on Jalopnik as a story within, right? Like it was such an influential place. And I miss that kind of, I think what I miss more is just the intimacy of the internet back then. It was such a smaller place and we all kind of knew each other.
Oh yeah, and the drama, the Jack Baruth stuff and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's listening. I know Jack listens to all this stuff. So,
So you know what, I've gotten in there. Jack and I had because he obviously had whatever rivalry with us as staff back then, and I got to know him since. I met him a couple times. We had, obviously it was an odd relation. His beef wasn't with me, right? Or our beef wasn't my beef. You know what I mean? It was always just like so he and I have gotten to know each other better through actually some of the Haggerty folks after Vortex, and I find he's, it's funny how people are like a certain personality online.
Oh God, yeah.
And then you meet them in real life and you're like, you're a good dude.
Yeah, I met him at Detroit and we talked back and forth, and at one point I was supposed to do some wheels for him, I think. I don't think it actually turned out, but yeah, no, that was just that was funny. But there was always some kind of drama going in there, and
right.
It was great.
Yeah.
You couldn't help but just get in and hope that the thread would get at least
locked
before David locked it.
Yeah.
or Anthony.
So,
yes. It's like, shit, this is just getting good, And
yeah.
And it was often about a vendor that, or somebody I didn't like, and I had beef with that nobody knew about. And it's like,
what's funny, like, again, not to turn this political, but the last couple of years, let's say maybe the last 4 or 5, and it was like, I go back to, I think you were there when we had this argument of like, should we do this political forum, right? And I was like, we need to do it. It's going to be page views. It'll be great, income, whatever. And we turn it on, and it was like, we had all these people who liked each other. And now that like they were talking politics, it just started to get so toxic. Like everybody was just so like sick of each other.
So I don't do
and then
Facebook.
We turned it off. Do you remember though, like when we turned off the political forum and it went away, it was almost like, I don't want to say overnight, but it was remarkable how quickly like everything went back to like cohesive and like as much as people got along on board. Right. But like it was more like we're all just car nerds together again. You don't have like the tinge of like, well, you're this or you're that, or
Yep. No, that's why I don't do Facebook. I do my company stuff on there and all that, but I can't because I don't want to know what your politics are. It just doesn't. There's nothing good that's going to come from that.
Well, the best lesson I ever got in politics too, or where we are today politically, was like, he's going to hate me if he's listening to this because he always regretted telling me this, but like Keith Lucas, remember Keith from APR?
Mm-hmm.
So like I was down there shooting cars with him one day. We're out just like on a shoot with some, I don't know what we had with us. I remember it was yellow. That's all I remember. But we were shooting a car and I was talking to him. I was like, man, APR stuff is, it's so good. Like, don't be jerks in our forums. Like at the time he would come in and like troll just a little bit, and he'd get like the fans of like GIAC or Unitronic or whomever, and it would be a pylon. And I was like, dude, I just don't understand. Your stuff's that good. It speaks for itself. Like, like Teddy Roosevelt, walk softly, carry a big stick, right? Like, and he was like, don't you understand? Like, I get paid to make the phones ring. When I go in and troll, right, the phones ring. That's why. And like, that's always been like, that's Fox News, that's MSNBC, that's Donald Trump. They know that if they go in and needle, like people will vote, people will watch, they will tune in. And like, that was such an eye-opening conversation for me that day. Like I look at like everything political or everything media nowadays in the same vein, which is just like, it's all about just trying to juice up and,
That's right.
That's why it's both brilliant and depressing at the same time.
Oh, it is. That's why it's not. Well, yeah, we don't have to go into that. But
yeah,
it's tough. But
all right. So I thought of an analogy when we were talking earlier. I'm going to jump back to one other thing. We're talking about profitability, right?
Yep.
And earlier in the conversation, this is a hell of a callback, going back to Tesla and how fast things have gotten.
Right.
And I think that's where, like, I think that whether it's politics, whether it's media, whether it's Tesla or electrics, like, or business, there's this happy medium of you get to a certain capability and then focus on the quality, because like you don't, like, I think there's always that challenge to want more profits, want more anything, want more like better 0 to 60 times.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I get into I haven't driven a Tesla Plaid, right? But I've driven an e-tron RS e-tron GT. And like doing launch on that car, it makes me nauseous, right? Like I'm kind of like, I don't need something this, I would do it once or twice as like the parlor trick, and then, just drive it otherwise not nearly that fast. And So like I go back to like when you have performance cars at that level, or you look at like McLaren's, even like for internal combustion, it's I don't want to say too much because that's the old man in me speaking, but like you just you don't need it. And so like I have so much more fun in my normally aspirated 964, right? Like that's all the pace I need. It's
Well, it's absolutely true with the grip levels of modern cars, especially modern performance cars, and getting away from hydraulic steering. I mean, you know, Porsche does some fantastic electric steering, but that it's not real. It's not feel. You're still there's a disconnect between what the front tires are doing, and it becomes more, you know, video game-ish with that grip, and it's just even the sounds are kind of, you know, they're pumped in and artificial and stuff. It's just not the same. And yeah, it's that old man thing, but it's you know, it's simple. It's like, you know, I guess you could say, you know, the people who love the, you know, old vinyl records and the softness of that, and
the analog
amplifiers, tubes versus, you know, it's there's the functional, practical aspect of it though that goes beyond this esoteric bullshit. The limits are so high on modern cars that you can't really not even exploit, but enjoy them without being a total douche out there. I mean, it's really hard and it's fun. And yeah, we're lucky. We grew up with cars that had, you know, my mom's daily driver was Inca Orange 2002 TII. That was, you know, and I learned to drive on that car, you know, with its little Michelin XAS, little, you know, 155 or 165 tire. That car was supremely capable, but it had no grip, you know, and it was meant to slide and go around there. And that's so 30, 40 miles an hour could be fun. My 911's like that, but you know, a Honda Odyssey minivan could stomp that thing from a stoplight. But it's like I feel every little pebble through the steering wheel, and I don't have to be, you know, a jackass out on the roads to have fun. And that I think that's, you know, I'm sorry, but you know, I'm not saying I'm right about everything. I'm certainly not, but I think I'm right about this. And I think it's hard to have a different perspective in that if you stay in the context of what we're talking about. Yeah,
well, for me, it's like there's just a certain level. It maybe dependent upon where you live too, right? Like when I was did the first RS7 launch in Vegas, it's like, wow, this power is really amazing and can bring that horizon to me in this kind of otherworldly way, right? But at the end of the day, like I had an R8 4.2 for a while.
You have to break the law to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not preaching about that. I'm just saying that's the context where there's certain situations and environments where you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. It's not prudent or, you know, for so many reasons. But, you know, it's still nice to be able to have fun and enjoy what you're driving and not feel like you're, you know, almost being mean to the car by, you know, just driving it legally. That's the kind of thing where they've got now. You talk about McLarens and supercars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, anybody who has the money to buy one of those is going to be able to find an environment where they can have fun, you know?
Well, yeah. And on a track, HPD or something like that, certainly.
Yes.
I found with the R8 4.2, like it was kind of at the edge of like around here. I live in, you know, central Pennsylvania, fairly populated, but not urban. And like, it was rare that I got to use it to its potential. Now, I didn't feel like insane with that car on the road, but now when you start talking about McLarens and whatever else, it's almost like, my God, you know, this is this is so much, it's unnecessary. And while it's an amazing piece of engineering, and I find it fantastic, I just don't like. I feel like there, like in so many things, there's a certain amount you can do, and if you find that happy medium, enjoy it because it's an amazing thing. That equilibrium,
because that's even harder than, you know, once you have the money, being able to buy McLaren. That's easy. You know, that's not a challenge. So, but having fun and, you know, within the scope of, you know, regular driving, that's not as easy to do. It's just funny that so many of those cars that really used to be so easy to find and answer those questions are now going for ridiculous money, and to the point where now you don't, once you get it, you feel like it's an investment now. I shouldn't even drive it.
Do you, I'm wandering a little bit off Audi in this conversation, but do you feel that way about your Porsche?
No.
I
got it intentionally. It's got fiberglass front rear bumpers, you know, fiberglass deck lid. It scrapes. there's just something about a 911, and I traded an E30 M3 straight up for it. This
Okay.
was owned by Mark Arsenal of, Illis and Fat Lace. We were just chatting and one day, and we each, were saying, man, I dig that car. I've never had an air-cooled Porsche, a 911. And he's like, oh, I've never had an E30 M3. And at the time they were of, similar value. So it's like,
Right.
let's just trade. It seems right. So luckily, I mean, he built the car, he did some nice things. He did some, elephant suspension components and stuff. And, it was clean. He had it resprayed, which I wish he hadn't, because it had this really amazing patina and stuff. It was kiln red, which is like an orangey red, and pretty rare color. But he had it resprayed, and it's not even the original color, which to me, and it's not a perfect paint job. It's good. It's a class out. I mean, you can find some flaws in it. And that's great to me, because I don't care about dings or scratches or anything on this car. And it's one of those few collector cars that, I've bastardized it with, body parts and wheels and stuff, and it's low and exhaust and different interior. And it's arguably worth more than a stock SC. It's awesome.
Right.
Hot rod 911s are, especially G bodies. That's the car. It has 150,000 miles on it. I've put 30,000 on it. I mean, I drive it, and it hasn't lost anything. It wouldn't be worth any more with 50,000 fewer miles. It wouldn't be worth a penny more.
So I'm not where I'm going. So my 964 is very similar, right? 150,000 miles. Actually, I'm 160, and glass out respray, not color change, and it looks pretty stock, but it's built and it's a driver. And I guess where I'm like, I don't, it's not an investment for me, and it is, right? Like I don't plan on reselling it. My one kid has already claimed it, and she'll get it. So it'll go to her when I'm dead or like when I'm too old to drive it. But like at the end of the day, it's like every time I will like call into Haggerty and be like, all right, how much is it worth? Do we have to adjust it? Right. So it's properly insured.
I just called them too. I let it go, man. I waited a year and a half, and the amount I had to up, it's just ridiculous.
Well, that's I mean, it didn't really change the policy to price so much for me, but like it at the same time,
when I think the value of it, that
you
think about it. Imagine if it was stolen a week earlier. It's like
totally
like such a dumbass,
Yeah, but it's crazy where I thought they were done going into the pandemic. I thought we'd hit the top of the bell, right? Like I thought, okay,
they actually dropped a bit. 964's NG bodies had actually dropped a little bit,
and then those
5,000-6,000.
Those two bring a trailer cars, two black ones. And I don't know if people playing games, but like they were both Carrera 2s. One had like 135,000 miles on it, and it went for 6 figures. And I was like, what's like, it's literally my car's spec, only, 30,000 less miles and original paint. Like, I don't get, I don't mind it going there. Right. But like, there's part of me, it's like, the question is there a certain point, and I don't really know that I've figured this one out yet, where I like feel questionable driving it or parking at places because I don't want to lose it, right? Like I like having it, and I don't know that I'd go out and buy another one
I wouldn't. I mean, even though it's insured for it, like I have it insured for replacement value, even though there isn't a car out there that I could buy that's like mine. Mine is, it's a hot rod. I'd personalize it. I'd have to start over somewhere, which in some ways would be fun to do, but I probably wouldn't get another one. I like this one, and I want to keep this one if it got. So yeah, but it doesn't. For me, it doesn't change anything. I drive it everywhere. I park it everywhere. I, sometimes don't. The windows are down a bit. I mean, it just doesn't. I don't treat it like that, like an investment. I know it is, but that's why I got it, because the M3 has done better. Mark sold it. He didn't keep it very long. He doesn't keep cars very long. But if he had kept it and we watched the valuations go, he'd be above me by, at least 5 figures, because that's the E30 market, the M3. But as far as driving, again, that was an S14 car, just lowered and had tarmacs on it, and it looked great. But man, there was just nothing really that special getting in and driving one of those to the store to get dinner or something like that. Getting in a 911, that's a different, that's a totally different thing. Just the sound and the feel of it is just better. And then the roads we have out here, man, which one would you rather have on the Angeles Crest National Forest Highway? I mean, there's no question. There's no question that 911 is faster and way more fun. So, but yeah, it's basically, I was referring to like, even like, GTIs and, the older GTIs, or, Corolla GTS, E86 back in, those are nothing. A Nissan 240. Yeah, those cars were, cars you go out and thrash and have fun driving,
Right.
fast, slow, or slow, fast. And now those things go, a good one that you would consider buying, that's almost too much for that. You almost wouldn't want to go out and thrash it.
I find, if you're not opposed to building a car, and I know you're not, I find the sweet spot, if I were going to buy something old and German that way, is to maybe call up Jamie or somebody like that and get something out of Europe, because there seem to be, I've noticed these cars in Europe that are like, if they're lower spec, but maybe typically lower spec, but not always, but like very, very clean, low mileage examples, because over there, gas was expensive. People are using public transportation much more commonly. And so you had these people who would like preserve these things. And
you have TÜV or you have MOT in the UK,
right,
where you can't have a pile. You can't register a piece
right,
of crap for very long over there. Yeah.
It's funny where like I've been watching, whether it's like Mark 1s, Mark 2s, Mark 3s, and the Audi side, like to find a front wheel drive, like obviously anything Quattro has gone insane, including like an 80 Quattro over there.
I know.
But like a front wheel drive 2-door, like nothing motor 4000 to get and put something in, like some cool motor.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's like quite cheap and very well preserved. Like everything's original inside and not cracked, and
you'll get your money back too. That's a good plan. It's something that it's truly viable, and that's why it makes sense to start with one. It's like if you were going to do your singerized, Ur Quattro, you're not going to start with an Ur Quattro. You're going to start with Coupe Quattro and do all that stuff. Just like an E30 M3, that kind of build. Why would you start with an actual M3? You can build an E30 chassis to go light years beyond what BMW Motorsport did with back in the 80s. So that's fun, to create something that's way more fun. Not everybody has the the means or even the vision to do something like that, but I think that's a great way to do a project, because you've got something different. It catches eyes. It goes great at Cars and Coffee, because people haven't seen that version of it, or it's old enough. Especially though, the Audi 4000 or the 80s and 90s, those are really growing on me, man. The sedans 80 and 90, I'd love to build a badass one of those. They're just so hard to find. And now
which B2 or B3?
What's that?
So B4, like what Scotto's getting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I love the B4 stuff. I do, and I never did back because they weren't great driver cars at all. There was an E30 was always a better driver car, or even a Volkswagen, a GTI, a Golf or something, to me was.
Well, that era, the B4 Audis before the 180 hit, like everything was kind of heavy, and unless it was an S2, and even the S2, it at that point that motor had kind of done its job in the Ur Quattro, which is lighter. You get to the B3s and B4s, and it's like it's just kind of heavy and like a little soft, and it just wasn't what the B2s had been, but it was a handsome design. So like nowadays, low cost, you throw it, speaking of like an 07K, like that's potential, get a low spec Quattro B4 and throw an 07K in that, and you have a faux S2 or RS2 that's like amazing.
That's what I'd love. And I love the Avance. Such a great looking car.
Yeah.
It's just funny though, because they never really appealed to me, but the opt box flare version for that was always like, oh my God, because we'd go to Kempton and they had one in their showroom, and it's like, this is perfect. This looks so good. That's like, to me, one of the best body kits ever made. So, Scotto's the prior design one, plays off that a little bit. That to me is a little extreme for me, as a car, that I would actually drive around a lot, but it looks badass. Totally. But I'd like to get one of those opt ones. And I guess didn't Jamie just find one for
Jason Whipple from Rotor?
Yeah, for Whipple got one. It figures, bastard. Yeah. But yeah, that's right. I do remember seeing that. It's like, yeah, that's cool.
That's a nice one too, because from what, at least from what Jason was telling me, it was like there aren't a lot of S2 versions of that car. Apparently, like the correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe I heard him wrong. That like some of the box flare ones that got built were just like the normally aspirated 5-cylinder.
Right.
And so like that somebody took an S2 and built one was pretty rare, and then that's one of the ones he got. So it looks pretty neat. I know he trolled Brian with it, which was kind of funny too. But totally cool car. I'm curious to see if he does much with it, or just kind of preserves it.
Right. Yeah,
But
I don't, because Opt had they had the cup kit for the Mark III, the flare kit and everything, and that was around the same time. And the manufacturer of that, because we sold a few and then we couldn't buy them anymore because the factory burned down. And I think it's the same one with the Audi, with the coupe. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were fewer than like 50 ever made, kind of thing, because they didn't make them long and then they didn't make them again.
Right. And probably prohibitively expensive for an already expensive car.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure there's some floating around. I mean, VW Sport, remember the actual VW Sport, the catalogs that they had?
Yeah.
They had a Fox, VW Fox wagon.
BBS body kit.
No, it wasn't BBS for that. It's the Rally Golf. It's the box flare kit for that. I still have that catalog. And
so do I.
It's a silver box, and it has box flares. It's almost exactly like a rally, and it's just like somebody made it work on a rally golf on there, and they were selling them. And there was always this, I think it was in Pennsylvania, this story in all the Fox forums, and I'm sure Jamie Orr knows this. Some guy who had one of those kits in his basement and would never sell it.
I wonder if
I wanted that so bad. But yeah, the Screaming Yellow Zonker was on that catalog too, and that had the BBS kit. Yeah.
So that most of those I think every other car I assumed it was BBS because every other car in that catalog had BBS body kits on it, right? So the
BBS isn't the Fox is a South American car. I can't imagine BBS would have anything to do with a South American VW specifically for a body kit. But you could be right. I had never heard of it being manufactured by them.
I'm sure Jamie. I'll have to ask Jamie or sometime because he's such a Fox nerd. But like part of me, but then I go back to like Audi Fox, right? Which that car is an evolution of anyway.
Right.
So like
so in some way, the front end and all that. But
it's evolution of B1, isn't it? It's longitudinal motor. I assumed it was because Volkswagen has this history of like moving like production, basically production tooling to other markets to keep things going, right?
So, but VW South America, they went their own way. They started, some of the things may have been shared, like the suspension and launch, but the Gall was originally air cooled. It used a Beetle motor in the front.
Did it?
So, and just a solid, twist beam in the back. So I don't know where. I don't think there's a lot of Passat. It's parts bin stuff for sure, but when you think of traditionally sharing chassis, I don't think so. I think the firewall is completely different, and the rear part of the car completely. Some of that
size wise,
it's like Mark I Rabbit. Yeah.
Well, the size wise, to me, it looks like a B1, like for Dasher would have only been a 5-door or would have only been a hatchback in the US, but like a B180.
It's like a 93-inch. It's like a 93-inch wheelbase though, so it's a lot shorter. So it just has like major overhangs and stuff. I had a Fox wagon that I had done everything in the world I could do to as far as bolt-ons, and I took the AC out. I took the front bumper just to get rid of some, the metal supports, just to get rid of some of the understeer in it. I had compomotives on it, and I fabbed my own suspension, lowering kit for it because there wasn't anything out for it. And Aaron Newman from New Speed helped me with a couple of the engine parts and stuff, and that was so much fun. Scirocco 16 valve seats in it because they have the same, they didn't both the same pattern. Took a gauge from the 5-speed one so I could get a tack. All these little cool things that only Fox nerds knew, but it just made that car so much more fun. And towards the end, I put a dual round headlight. I fabbed a dual round headlight from Mark I Cabrio to bolt in there. Cleaned it
That's
all
cool.
up, welded it up. So yeah, I miss that car. But a two-door wagon, because my first car ever was a 67 Volkswagen Squareback.
Was it?
So two-door Volkswagen wagons really have an appeal to me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, dude, we've gone for a while. I really
Yeah, I know.
appreciate you.
My battery on my laptop's about to go in.
I'm surprised my AirPods aren't like beeping at me. I have
yeah,
actually
that's
like
pretty good. 2 hours like that is pretty good. All right,
man.
dude.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Cool.
All right, man.
All right, man.
Be
Thanks
well.
again.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Bye.